Chapter 1752. Hashtag every day. I'm under a seal called blanket. Hashtag. So what if I die of old age? The happiest way to die is to die from the heat in winter. Hashtag you woke up so early. I have to risk my life to accompany you because of you. Look, I have dark circles under my eyes these days. Sun Lan yawned sleepily and tried to open her eyes. She couldn't help but complain to her friend. Yesterday, I met an acquaintance. He secretly asked me if I was too nymphomaniac. He even advised me to take it easy. No matter how young I am, I shouldn't be so tormented. God has mercy on me. I'm still a virgin. Even though I've been in the army for 2 years, learned a lot of dirty words, and seen a lot of shameless scenes, I still have self-control. Feng Yi smiled and said, just ignore them. Whether to ignore the busybodies who compared the two of them, or ignore the acquaintances who misunderstood Sun Lan's innocence, it depends on what the listener thinks. Sun Lan and Feng Yi had known each other for a few years, so she naturally understood. She muttered, gossip is a fearful thing. How can you be so free and easy? Sun Lan couldn't care less about what others said. He could only do his best to do his own thing. Looking at the dark sky outside, Sun Lan rubbed her hungry belly and took out a bun wrapped in a handkerchief from her sleeve. As soon as she opened it, a burst of steam and fragrance came out. Sun Lan took the thermos cup that contained thick meat soup from her waist. This thing was made by her lord. There were 4 layers in total. The innermost layer was made of porcelain. The second layer was made of copper. The third layer was also porcelain, and the fourth layer was made of bamboo to prevent falling. The inner layer could be tightened with a lid to prevent the soup from spilling out, and the outer layer had a bamboo cover. This thing had a thermal function, so it was quite convenient to use. You woke up so early. Have you eaten breakfast? Feng Yi turned a page and said, not yet. Sun Lan said, I have extra here. Do you want to eat some first? Feng Yi smiled. It's not good to eat too much breakfast. Changxing said that she would bring some for me. Sun Lan took a big bite of the bun. Her cheeks were stuffed. She was a little full before she swallowed. How could she not be full after being forced to eat dog food? Wrongly, I heard a rumor. Do you want to hear it? Feng Yi didn't eat, so Sun Lan drank the meat buns and a whole pot of broth. The warm meat buns and broth filled Sun Lan's stomach, and at the same time, made him feel a comfortable warmth spread from inside his body. It was very comfortable. What news? Sun Lan was not a gossipy person. The gossip that he was talking about was definitely not about the Dong or Li family. It was most likely serious news. I heard that the Jinlin Academy has undergone a major change, Sun Lan said. I don't know the details yet. Feng Yi frowned slightly. Was it related to the great changes in the Jinlin Academy? Why didn't he receive any news? Her father hadn't mentioned anything about it. So where did Sun Lan hear this news from? Sun Lan said, didn't I collect homework from my classmates and send it to the teachers a few days ago? Master Yuanjing happened to be there too. He said something to the teachers and asked them to speed up the assessment of the students and teach more practical things. He said that something big would happen in the academy next year. When he went over, Master Yuanjing and the others were almost done talking. He only heard the end of it. No matter what the change was, as a student of the Jinlin Academy, this news was also related to them, so they had to pay attention. Sun Lan said, Grandpa isn't in Wanzhou, and I don't have any elders to talk to. I don't have any connections to ask for information. Feng Yi understood what Sun Lan meant. He said, after school today, I'll ask my father about it. Her father, Feng Zhen, was one of the Lord's important officials. If there was a major change in the Jinlin Academy, there was no reason that he didn't know anything. The two talked for a while. The sky outside gradually brightened, and students arrived at the classroom one after another. They greeted each other in 2s and 3s, took out their books, sat in their seats, and began their morning reading. The Jinlin Academy had a strict schedule. Regardless of spring, summer, autumn, or winter, the students always entered at the beginning of the day and left at the end of the day. During this period, there was more than an hour for the students to have lunch. In the afternoon, the students entered at the beginning of the day and left at the end of the day. Winter came and went, and there was no exception. The teachers arrived a little later than the students, but not too late. However, it was a little strange today. The morning reading was almost over, but the teacher on duty hadn't arrived yet. Gradually, a few students couldn't sit still. They wondered why the teacher was late and couldn't focus on their books. Could it be that teacher Nia is sick? The teacher who was teaching them was Master Yuanjing's son-in-law. His surname was Nia, his name was Sun, and his courtesy name was Chengyan. He used to be Huangsong's strategist. After Huangsong was defeated, Nia Sun was captured and surrendered. However, he gave up on being an official and turned to education. All these years, he had been helping his father-in-law, Master Yuanjing. After a few years, this extremely good-looking teacher Nia Sun had become the most handsome and popular teacher in the Jinlin Academy. In addition to Nia Sun, there was another popular teacher. That teacher was called Cheng Jing, and it was said that he was also Master Yuanjing's disciple. However, compared to Nia Sun's outstanding appearance and gentle temperament, Cheng Jing was quite strict and unapproachable. Under normal circumstances, no one dared to provoke Cheng Jing. If a student made a mistake in Cheng Jing's hands, they wouldn't be able to get away with it. Therefore, the senior students were more concerned about Nia Sun. If it was Cheng Jing's turn to be on duty and didn't come today, not only would the students be worried, but they would also secretly feel lucky. It can't be. Yesterday, I saw the teacher coming back from the girls' class. I greeted him on the way, and he seemed to be in good spirits. Being sick isn't something that accumulates over time. Maybe he didn't sleep well last night and caught a cold? The morning reading was almost over, and the students had the guts to gossip in low voices. While they were talking, the students sitting by the window saw a familiar figure and quickly gestured for the students who were talking to shut up. When Nia Sun came over, the students who were whispering were already sitting upright and still, holding the books they had copied by themselves and muttering. No one dared to ask why Nia Sun was late. Nia Sun explained himself first. He wasn't late. He just went to the girls' class to inform them of something. Now it was his turn to teach Class A. When Nia Sun spoke, everyone tacitly stopped the morning reading. More than 50 pairs of eyes looked at Nia Sun. Nia Sun's voice wasn't loud, but the students in the classroom could hear him clearly. In order for all the students to hear what the teacher said clearly, the students' seats were arranged in a circle, with a total of 3 circles inside and outside. The teacher was teaching at the podium in the middle. Only some special classes would change the arrangement. What I'm going to say next will affect your future. You all need to listen carefully. When Nia Sun said this, the expressions of many students changed. They were very nervous, but Nia Sun didn't give them any time to digest. He said directly, after careful discussion by Duke Lanting and a few great scholars of the academy, they all agreed that the academy can no longer teach you anything more. What? Chapter 1753. Among you, more than 90% of you are the first batch of students accepted when the academy was established. You have been studying for 12 years. Life is but 100 years, and you have already spent more than 10% of it in the academy. Nia Sun repeated what he had said several times. His eyes swept across the faces of the young people below, and his lips curled into a faint smile. In life, what we seek is nothing more than fame and fortune. You have studied hard for so many years, and it is finally time to show your ambition. Leave the academy, there is a wider world. At this time, there was no concept of graduation. Even the aristocratic families couldn't provide more than 10 years of such high-quality and systematic education for their children. Basically, they had to learn as long as they lived. But the Golden Scale Academy was established by Jiang. In order to save teaching resources and reduce the teacher's burden, the senior students who had learned well should get lost. No, they should come out and work for her. Otherwise, what was the point of cultivating them for so many years? The senior students graduated from the academy, and the first grade students took their place. In this way, the leeks could be harvested batch after batch, growing and multiplying endlessly. If the students wanted to further their studies, they could borrow other books from the Golden Scale Pavilion. The headmaster of the academy could not teach them for a lifetime. This news was like a bolt from the blue to most of the students. They were used to studying in the academy and were not ready to leave. Nye-sun told Jiang. Ji meant that graduation was not to drive the students out of the academy, but to end this stage of study after they had completed their studies in the academy and met the requirements. At the same time, graduation also meant that their years of study were recognized by the academy and the famous scholars. They were qualified to use this as capital to promote themselves and even be recruited by the Lanting Duke. When this news came out, the students' depression, worry, and confusion were swept away. They became high-spirited and excited. Conquer them. Enter officialdom. Didn't they study hard for so many years just to change their original fate? These students were the first batch of students in the Golden Scale Academy. There were 100 male students and 100 female students, including Feng Yi and some other students who got into the class through connections. There were no more than 210 students in this batch. This batch of students were the orphans of fallen soldiers. To put it bluntly, they were common people. Common people were qualified to study for 12 years, and also qualified to be recruited. It was almost an opportunity to change 18 generations of ancestors. For a moment, all the students were eager to try. They were excited and thought that everyone would be conquered. Ji Yinshu had invested 12 years of manpower, resources, and financial resources. How could she waste them? In the end, Nye-sun's next words sent them from the heaven of excitement into the world of confusion. Those who do not pass the graduation examination will either leave the academy or stay back for a year and continue to participate in the examination with the students of the next level. Everyone, what? There's a test for graduation? Nye-sun said. The graduation assessment is to test the results of your studies in the academy these years. When you graduate from the academy will keep the files of your studies in the academy forever. No matter where you go in the future, you will be a student of the Golden Scale Academy. Each of you represents the academy and is the face of the academy. The academy will not allow students who fail in their studies to go out and ruin the good reputation it has accumulated over the years. Therefore, a graduation test was set up. Only those who passed the test with outstanding results would have the right to graduate and leave. In the future, you will pay. No matter if you are an official, a teacher, or living in a corner, you have to be careful with your words and actions. You can't discredit the academy. He spoke very sternly. The students could feel the power coming from his body and subconsciously became more obedient. The assessment will be set at the end of the first month after the new year. Everyone's expression changed. This time, this was not a chance for people to relax during the new year. Those who pass the graduation assessment can participate in the assessment held by Duke Lanting in May next year. Those who pass can become an official. Nye-sun threw another bomb. Those who compete with you on the same stage are not only your classmates, but also the 85 ladies in the female class and the scholars of the Golden Scale Pavilion. Everyone, don't embarrass the academy. Just do your best. Feng Yi had something to ask. Headmaster, can you tell us the general content of the assessment? Nye-sun said. It will be the 6 arts of a gentleman. There are 6 subjects in total. Everyone, someone said with a trembling voice. The ladies in the female class will also participate. They have also studied hard in the academy for many years. Of course they will participate. Nye-sun sighed in his heart. There should be 100 people in the female class. However, some of the older ones couldn't stand it and chose to marry and have children. Some of them went to the military camp to work hard. The remaining 85 had lost their parents. Their relatives couldn't control them and didn't have the right to decide their souls. These female students also felt that the academy was quieter and safer. They didn't have the thought of marrying, so they stayed in the academy to continue their studies. When Nye-sun said this, everyone wailed in their hearts. There was no other reason. The ladies in the female class were extremely skilled in martial arts. They didn't belong to the category of normal women. Competing with them on the same stage was too much of a bully. However, Headmaster Nye-sun said that the assessment of the 6 arts of a gentleman was etiquette, music, archery, writing, calligraphy, and mathematics. Other than archery and writing, the female class had no advantage in the other subjects. Moreover, As long as it wasn't a face-to-face fight, the results of the male class wouldn't be bad. When they thought of this, everyone's anxious hearts slowly returned to their original place. As long as they didn't fight one-on-one with the ladies in the female class and hurt each other, they still had a chance. Nya-sun saw that the students naturally accepted the fact that the ladies would compete with them on the same stage. He was a little shocked. However, he soon figured it out. This batch of students in the Golden Scale Academy had been living in the academy for more than 10 years. They were isolated from the outside world. The education they received was open, and their thoughts were also open-minded. In addition, during the big classes, they often interacted with and compared with the female class students. In their minds, they didn't feel that there was anything wrong with women being conquered. If someone belittled them in front of them, they would think that person was being ridiculous. This scene was naturally caused by Jiang Qigong. Ji hoped to see it. It was difficult to change the minds of adults, but it was different for children. In order for you to successfully pass the graduation assessment, your studies will be quite arduous. Please don't complain. After being serious for a while, Nya-sun's tone finally softened. There was a hint of a smile on his face. The students muttered in private. What's the big deal about suffering? It's the big deal if you don't pass the assessment. If they didn't pass the assessment, it meant that the results of their 12 years of study wouldn't be recognized. They would have to repeat the year and take the assessment together with the next cohort. It was too embarrassing. Everyone's nerves were stretched taut. They couldn't wait to revise their lessons even in their dreams. #I love learning. Learning makes me happy. The headmasters of the academy were worried that these students would become sick from studying. When the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival began, the headmasters encouraged the students to go out and play for a day or two. Of course, the real reason was. Chapter 1754. To the people of Yangzhou, the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival was an event of great significance. Jiang. In the first 2 years after Ji took over Xiangyang District, she organized the Lantern Festival in order to quickly restore the livelihood of the people and encourage them to have hope in life. In the following years, Xiangyang District developed better and better. Hundreds of thousands of people came to live there, and the tradition of the Lantern Festival was preserved. Many smart merchants seized the opportunity and imitated Jika House to organize various promotional events. Not only did it arouse the people's desire to shop, but it also increased their sales. The merchants made a lot of money. When other merchants saw this, they were extremely envious. Soon after, they organized some kind of promotional event to benefit the people during the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival. This was somewhat similar to the Double 11 Chopping Festival in the Salted Fish Dimension. Every year before New Year's Eve, these events were held. Some diligent and thrifty people developed the habit of stocking up during the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival. Of course, there were many merchants who participated in the event. Some sold fake goods for personal gain, and some even cheated the common people into buying inferior goods at low prices. There were also those who maliciously used price wars to squeeze the living space of their own kind, thereby dominating the market share. Even Jiang Ji's occupation in her previous life was not related to being a merchant. However, she had come into contact with many people and understood some of the little tricks of the business world. These little tricks were the leftover tricks of the ancestors in her era. However, in this ancient era where business development was still in its infancy, every idea could set off a considerable business storm. In other words, with the advanced business philosophy, even Jiang Ji did not want to be a vassal and fight for the world. As a merchant, she might be able to create a considerable business empire. Therefore, while promoting business development, the Empress Dowager Ji made many rules to restrict merchants. Many of the regulations were inexplicable to the current merchants. However, over time, as Xiangyang District flourished, and its economy far exceeded that of ordinary states, some merchants who had been doing business for a long time figured out some clues. They increasingly felt that the Duke of Lanting was unfathomable. Taking one step at a time was not scary. What was scary was taking 10 steps at a time. They could not afford to offend such a big boss. Time to slip away. Out of fear, They repeatedly restrained themselves and the shops under their name, not daring to overstep the boundaries. Others were not as clear-headed as them. Some of them were black-hearted merchants who would resort to unscrupulous means to earn money. Unfortunately, this was Xiangyang district. The regulations regarding merchants, shops, and commodities were detailed and clear. If one was caught, he would be sacrificed to the heavens. There was basically no hope for him to make a comeback. Once they crossed the line, not only would they face a heavy fine and a year in prison, but they would also be banished from Xiangyang City. Their businesses would no longer be able to do business in Xiangyang City. For merchants, it wasn't a big deal if they could use money to avert disaster. The punishment of being banished and unable to do business was severe. Against the merchants, Jiangyu, Ji was not lenient when it came to collecting taxes. Of course, merchants could also think of ways to evade taxes, but once they were caught, they would not be able to bear the consequences. Even so, there were still countless businessmen who racked their brains to rent shops in Xiangyang City Market. There were many people and business opportunities in Elephant Sun City. The business environment was good and stable, so there was no need to worry about being robbed by bandits. In the past few years, there had been chaos in chaos. The feudal lords and tyrants had imposed exorbitant taxes and levies, and there were even cases of coercion and robbery. As a result, some merchants had gone bankrupt and were unable to continue their business. Even if there were no feudal lords or tyrants, there were bandits and gangsters. Any shop that wanted to do business would have to pay a high protection fee. Not handing it over, then they would rush forward and loot all the shops. In comparison, Xiangyang City was a paradise for the merchants. Every New Year's Eve Lantern Festival was their carnival. Some merchants from other places also wanted to come and join in the fun. They booked temporary stalls 1 or 2 months in advance and brought their goods over to sell. They came in high spirits and returned in high spirits. While the merchants were happy, some of the scholars and minor landowning families were unhappy. Scholars, farmers, merchants, and merchants were at the bottom. The Lord of Lanting did not respect the scholars, but instead took care of the merchants. Was there something wrong with his brain? That was what he thought, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. After all, this was Jiang, Ji's old nest, her home field. The last person who dared to insult Jiang in public? Those who badmouthed Ji were beaten up by her brainless fans on the way home. The most annoying thing about this person was that after he was beaten, he didn't reflect on himself, and instead went to report it to the authorities. In the end, the authorities asked about the whole story, and generously gave out 7 days' worth of prison meals. For a large clan like the Feng clan, they were very smart and knew how to protect themselves. Why would they rush to make such a stupid statement? Not only did he not oppose Jiang, instead, Ji found ways to express her goodwill and earned a lot of benefits from it. For example, the clan leader of the Feng clan. The current clan leader of the Feng clan was Feng Xiao, Feng Jin's eldest brother. He used Feng Jin's connections to cut the queue and rented a few of the best shops in the market. The business scope was very wide. At this time, Feng Jin realized that his clan also had a lot of business. Feng Xiao, he couldn't help but complain. Do you think you grew up eating wind and drinking dew? There were so many people in the main and side branches of the Feng clan. Even if the clan's resources were tilted to the main branch, the large number of side branches also had a lot of expenses. Their living expenses were not bad, but studying and learning to write were the ones that burned money. All of these needed money because of the unregulated business in this era, coupled with the influence of the chain of contempt. The landowning families had shops under their names, but most of them followed the rules. Most of their income still depended on the land. They spent a lot of effort to acquire land, because there was money to be made in it. Under the constraints of the family tradition, the Feng clan didn't act so arrogantly, but they still had a lot of land under their name, many of which were accumulated by their ancestors. But what about their second brother in Jiang? Ji was bound to them, and the latter had been suppressing the landowning families. If it was in the past, they could probably kill them by gathering the power of the landowning families. Now they were getting stronger and the landowning families were being weakened. Feng? The eldest brother frowned and realized that things weren't so simple. He discussed with his father, Feng Run, in private. He didn't know what they said, but they sold a part of the land at a friendship price. This part of the land eventually went to Jiang. Ji's hands were full of fertile land. To return a plum with a peach, they relied on this favor. They also got a shop in a prime location in the market from Feng Jin at a low price. The Feng clan used to have some shops, but the profit was very low. It was not as much as the income from the land, let alone stable. Feng. They studied the market and made adjustments. In addition, they sold a part of the land to Jiang Ji's favor in exchange for preferential treatment. The business was booming, and in the end, they even opened their business to the counties around Xiangyang. The annual income was actually several times the dividends from the land. Well, this business was not a loss. Feng Jin was speechless. Since his eldest brother took over the position of the clan leader, he seemed to have opened the door to a strange world. Huaizhang, are you still not done? Madame's gentle voice came from outside the house. Feng. He responded, yes, I'm coming. Feng. For years after he separated from his first wife, Madame Du, he only remarried when his two legitimate sons reached the age of understanding. He didn't have any resistance towards remarrying. The legitimate sons needed a mother to teach them, and the Feng clan also needed a matron. After a failed marriage and a hysterical wife, he didn't have high expectations for his second wife. Instead, he was full of surprises. Chapter 1755. Why are you dressed so plainly today? Feng Gui came out and saw his wife's light makeup. He was not used to it. The culture in Elephant Sun City was very open. Women's makeup was bright and bright. In recent years, there had been great improvements in the dyeing of fabrics. Bright red and purple colors were no longer something that only wealthy families could afford. Walking on the street, the women's clothes were colorful. Among the shops under the Feng family, those that dealt with women and children were the most profitable. Feng Gui was not a pedantic person. Bright colors were the trend now. Naturally, he would not stop his wife from pursuing the trend. But ever since she married into the family, she had been cautious. Her jewelry, makeup, and clothes were all plain and old-fashioned. It was fine on a normal day, but it was bustling outside today. It was only right for her to dress up in a festive manner. Feng Gui sent his wife a lot of jewelry and makeup. Unfortunately, she only used them in her room and refused to see anyone. His wife smiled. It's not good to dress too brightly. I'm worried that people will gossip. Feng Gui replied. What's there to gossip about? His wife smiled and did not speak. Feng Gui frowned and remembered that he was married twice. So was his wife. Although Feng Gui was the leader of the Feng family, and the Feng family seemed to be in the right position in these troubled times, it was not a problem for them to maintain their former glory. However, he still had a pair of legitimate sons. Moreover, his wife did not die, but he had a peaceful divorce. His biological mother was still alive. With such conditions, even with the halo of his family background, he did not fare well in the marriage market of the aristocratic families. The aristocratic families disdained marrying their legitimate daughters. Even if Feng Gui was clean and had no concubines, and his personal conditions were not bad, his daughter would be the mother of his second child. In the future, when they had children, they would have 3 legitimate sons. If they did not inherit the family name, they would be at a disadvantage. Small families would like to have a piece of this pie, but the Feng matriarch had high standards. They could not match up to him. In the end, old Madame Feng's hair was about to turn white from worry. Just when Feng Gui said that he would continue to be single, he actually found a suitable candidate. This candidate was not bad either. His family background was noble. His father was a great scholar, and his mother was from a prominent family. At the age of 15, he was engaged to a scholar from an aristocratic family. That's right, Feng Gui knew this scholar. They had been friends since a long time ago. When the scholar got married, Feng Gui had even sent him a congratulatory gift. Unfortunately, this guy was a short-lived ghost. After getting married for less than a month, he wanted to have fun. When he went out for a horse race, he was thrown off his horse and trampled to death. He left behind his beautiful but childless wife as a widow. At that time, The 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was in vogue. She was forced to return to her parents' home because of rumors of her husband's curse. Feng Gui had even gone to the scholar's funeral to offer his condolences and lamented for a few days. He did not expect that after a few years, he would marry his wife. Smiley face. Angle. No matter what, Feng Gui really liked this madam, especially when he had his first wife as a comparison. What's there to be afraid of? Don't tell me they'll gossip in front of you. I'm afraid they don't know how to spell the word death, said Feng Gul. A few days ago, didn't your mansion purchase a new batch of winter clothes? I think that primrose color is not bad. I remember that you also made 2 new headwear. After all, she was the matriarch of the Feng family. Her wealth couldn't be summed up with the words, having a mine at home. How could she dress as shabbily as a small family? The madam looked at Feng Gui helplessly. In the end, she couldn't argue with him. She went back and changed her clothes. She also changed her makeup. It had to be said that the fresh colors and bright makeup had a great visual impact. Just by standing there, she was eye-catching. While Feng Gui waited for his wife, he played mahjong with his 2 sons. He couldn't help but blame Lanting Gong Jiangpingji. She had too many playthings. Speaking of which, wasn't she fighting a war outside? How did she have the time to do these things? Perhaps Feng Gui's wife had been a widow for too long. She couldn't get used to such bright colors, especially when people were looking at her. However, when she saw that the women on the streets were dressed more brightly than her nervousness gradually dissipated. The New Year's Eve Lantern Festival was held in the largest markets and business districts in Xiangyang District. Every year, red lanterns would be hung high in front of every house. The street lights were bright, and people were weaving in and out. Other than the usual activities, such as guessing lantern riddles and drawing colorful lanterns, there were also a variety of new entertainment activities. For example, the official theatrical troupe would put on a stage to perform on that day. Basically, they were all popular and festive plays. One could watch them with a cheap ticket. Of course, the Lantern Festival also included eating and drinking. Under the leadership of Jiang Pingji, the unreliable feudal lord, Xiangyang District was very enthusiastic about the development of delicacies. Although there were some dark dishes, most of them were delicious. They were easy and quick to prepare, and were very suitable for roadside stalls. How attractive would the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival be? Along the way, Feng Gui saw many familiar faces. These people were the ones who criticized Jiang Pingji the most. Yesterday, one of them even criticized Jiang Pingji for placing too much emphasis on merchants and putting the cart before the horse. However, although their mouths weren't honest, their bodies were quite honest. Feng Gui greeted the other party from a distance. The other party smiled awkwardly but politely. Even the gentry would come out to join in the fun, not to mention the other commoners. Feng Gui wouldn't imitate the commoners and eat while walking, but he still bought some, and found a nearby private room to slowly enjoy his meal. Uncle, Auntie. Feng Gui had just entered the inn with his wife and servants when he heard Changxing's call. Turning his head to look, he saw his second brother, Fengyi, standing beside Changxing. There were also a few other youths who looked either familiar or unfamiliar. Based on their temperament, most likely they weren't commoners. They were probably classmates who were on good terms with the academy. Changxing whispered something to the others, and brought Fengyi forward to greet them. Why don't I see my 2 cousins? Feng Gui replied. They're getting old. How can they still be restrained? They accepted a friend's invitation to go out and have fun. Although his 2 sons had been led astray by his first wife, Feng Gui brought them up personally, and then threw them into the Golden Scale Academy to train them. In the end, he managed to turn them around. The trauma of their childhood didn't seem to have left any lasting effects on them. Now that they stood out, they were the standard descendants of the Feng family. Feng Gui also heard that his 2 sons had stayed up all night fighting for the Golden Scale Academy's graduation examination. He felt very gratified. Striking a balance between work and rest was the right way. They had studied too hard recently. Taking advantage of the festival, they should go out and meet their friends and relax a little. Of course, the real reason wasn't known to outsiders. Feng Gui felt that his wife was still young. If he brought his sons out, He was afraid that others would misunderstand as a father bringing his son and daughter-in-law smiley face. Angle _ I heard from Brother Rongli that my two cousins have been very tired recently. Uncle should talk to them and tell them not to push themselves too hard. Feng Gui's two sons' talents could only be considered average. They were also the oldest in their cohort, so naturally, they were under a lot of pressure. If they were to be held back, where would the Feng family's reputation go? Feng Gui nodded in agreement. The Feng family had always been like this. When they were young, they held on tightly. When they grew up, they basically didn't care. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a weirdo like Feng Ju. His own sons. He really should show more concern for them. After chatting idly for a while, Feng Gui let Changxun go out and have fun. With an elder by her side, the youngsters wouldn't be able to enjoy themselves. Today was a suitable day to bump into acquaintances. Feng Gui had just started criticizing his third brother, Feng Ju. When he went upstairs, he saw him. Feng Ju and his second brother, Feng Jin, were staring at each other. Chapter 1756. Feng Gui's words were not an exaggeration. Feng Ju seemed to have been avoiding his two elder brothers for the past few years. As long as it was an occasion where Feng Gui and Feng Jin were present, this fellow would never appear. There were some situations where he really couldn't avoid them, so he simply used the excuse of visiting friends and relatives, or simply claimed to be ill and stayed at home. Feng Gui felt that it was pointless. What was the point of the three brothers quarreling like this? Feng Jin thought so too. Was there any obstacle between brothers that could not be overcome? Besides, it was a chaotic world now. It was already not easy for the three of them to survive. Look at the other brothers, they were basically separated by life and death. He had even crossed the threshold of life and death. Was there any contradiction in this world that was more difficult to cross than the difference between life and death? Look at Sir Cheng's two sons. The eldest son, Cheng Sun, hung himself on the crooked tree that was Su Bei. When Su Bei was defeated, he committed suicide to follow him. Looking at Wei Si's elder brother, Wei Dan, it was said that he treated Wei Si like a brother and a father. Their brotherly relationship was deep, but in the end, he also chose to commit suicide after being defeated. The two brothers, Meng Hung and Ye Sun, were still alive. However, they had fought against each other and plotted against each other to kill each other. After witnessing so many parting of life and death, what knot in his heart could not be untied? Humph! At the end of the day, it was all Huang Song's fault. Back then, Huang Song had abducted Feng Ju right in front of Huang Song. This delay had lasted for more than 10 years. At the thought of this, Feng Jin's hatred for Huang Song deepened. Unfortunately, Huang Song had signed an oath of alliance with Jiang Pingji, which was equivalent to a protective talisman. Feng Jin could not touch him. Feng Ju was still watching from the side. If Feng Jin really made a move, it would be even worse. At the end of the day, Feng Jin had suffered quite a bit, because he was afraid of harming the innocent. When Feng Gui came up, Feng Jin and Feng Ju, who had been staring at each other, felt increasingly uncomfortable. It was as if they had not expected to meet under such circumstances. Fortunately, they were still rational. They maintained an awkward but polite smile, and stiffly bowed to their elder brother and sister-in-law. Feng Gui coughed lightly. His voice sounded unnatural. Everyone's here today. Indeed, they hadn't even gathered for the new year a few years ago. Feng Gui had thought that they would never see each other again. Did you come out together? Or did you just happen to bump into each other? Why didn't you bring someone along? What's the point of being alone on such a lively day? The Lunar New Year's Eve Lantern Festival was supposed to be spent with family. If these two left their wives and children at home, and went out to enjoy themselves, it would be too much of a jerk. Hee. If it weren't for the Feng family's background and the genetic buff, with their EQ, they would have been alone forever. Feng Gui chose a mat and sat down. Feng Jin said, Jing Xian has an appointment with sister-in-law. Jin doesn't like crowds, so I'll wait here. Feng Ju nodded in agreement, but his expression was a little stiff. I see. Feng Gui nodded his head. It looked like his two younger brothers weren't hopeless after all. I heard that younger sister-in-law is busy with government affairs, and it's rare for her to have a chance to relax. Third sister-in-law, since you're shopping with her, you must enjoy yourself to the fullest. After all, we're family. We can't distance ourselves from each other. These words were not only directed at Wei Jingxian's sisters-in-law, but also hinted at his two younger brothers to end their childish conflict. Speaking of which, it was strange. The three brothers of the Feng clan usually didn't see each other, but the wives of the three were close friends. However, Wei Jingxian was currently working for the government and didn't have much free time. Instead, it was Feng Gui's wife who was closer to Feng Ju's wife. As soon as Feng Ju finished speaking, the other two brothers agreed awkwardly. Initially, it was Feng Jin and Feng Ju staring at each other. Now it was the three brothers staring at each other. The air was filled with an atmosphere that made one feel awkward. Feng Gui's wife had been able to maintain a warm smile at first, but under the pressure of the three brothers' awkward auras, she gradually lost her smile. Finally, Feng Gui put on the attitude of an older brother and asked about Feng Jin's recent work situation. No matter how awkward the topic was, it was better than the three of them staring at each other in silence. As the saying goes, an older brother is like a father. When Feng Gui was young, he took good care of his younger brother's studies. It was normal for him to be concerned about work when he grew up. Feng Jin's work was naturally smooth sailing. In the years that Jiang Pingji was at the front lines, he had lived a comfortable life. Without his lord, who would occasionally come up with all sorts of weird ideas to torture the people around her, he would secretly laugh in his bed at night. After speaking about Feng Jin, Feng Gui wanted to show some concern for his youngest brother. Feng Ju was the father of two children. Even if it was for the sake of his wife and children, he should reconsider his life. Admittedly, Feng Ju wouldn't starve to death even if he stayed at home. After all, he was still a direct descendant of the Feng family. As his eldest brother, Feng Gui would provide for his family. Even if Feng Gui was unwilling to provide for them, Feng Ju was also a rich man. His private treasury was very rich. It wouldn't be a problem for him to eat and drink until he died. However, Feng Ju was the father of two children. Did he really want to set such a decadent image and role model for his children? Feng Ju was still a dead pig that didn't fear boiling water. His eldest brother's words went in one ear and came out the other. He listened attentively and refused to repent. The more Feng Jin listened, the angrier he got. If not for his good manners, he really wanted to give his younger brother a beating and beat the water out of his brain. What kind of bewitching potion did that scoundrel Huang Song feed his younger brother? Huang Song couldn't even turn over a new leaf, yet Feng Ju still wanted to hang himself from this crooked tree. But the reality was Feng Gui sighed. There's no one else here today. Huaijia, why don't you tell me what you think? Why would you rather waste your time than pull yourself together? Feng Ju said. How can you know the happiness of a fish if you're not a fish? You're not me. How can you know what I'm planning? Feng Gui and Feng Jin stared at their younger brother with a death stare. Such a troublesome younger brother, they should just beat him to death. Feng Jin suppressed his anger. What kind of plans do you have now? Must you learn from Cheng Jing and become a teacher in the academy? Is it better to teach and educate people? Although Cheng Jing was also unwilling to become an official, he was unwilling to do so for himself and his fellow disciples from the same sect as Langjia. He wasn't wasting his time teaching in the academy either. Every day, he was enriching himself with learning. On the other hand, what about Feng Ju? Feng Jin hoped that his younger brother would go and teach as well. But on second thought, his children would also be studying in the academy in the future. If they really let Feng Ju, this traitorous scammer, teach them, that would really be misleading their children. Feng Jin was a kind and honest person. He couldn't bring up such an unkind suggestion. In the face of his two older brothers' threat of, if you don't tell us the truth, we'll gang up on you and beat you up, Feng Ju finally compromised a little. His eyes darkened and he let out a sigh. One look, and it was obvious that this was the prelude to a long speech. There are some things that you don't know. It's not that I don't like Lu Shi. I'm just a little confused. What confused? Feng Jin wasn't going to listen to his youngest brother's nonsense. This fellow spent his days eating, drinking, and having fun. He followed Huang Song everywhere. Was there any place in the entire Xiangyang district that they hadn't wandered? Not to mention Shenyang district. They had wandered the entire Wanzhou. Feng Jin had never seen such an impudent, defeated feudal lord. Confused, he thought that Feng Ju was feigning ignorance. I'm thinking, is this person Lu Shi or someone else? Feng Jin and Feng Gui were prepared to answer their younger brother's doubts. They didn't expect to hear this. That's it. That's it. Feng Ju spread his hands and said, That's it. That's it. Feng Jin was speechless. Chapter 1757. Feng Ju's desire to live was still very strong. Faced with the death stares of his two brothers, he revealed a little of the content. In the end, it stemmed from a dream. What dream? Feng Jin suppressed his anger. This mischievous child had always believed that man could conquer nature. He did not believe in feudalism at all. As long as it was related to numerology, he had always been dismissive. Why was he talking about a dream now and being confused for a long time? Feng Ju said, A dream related to Lu Shi. Feng Jin held his breath. He was afraid that his brother would say something profane. What good could come from a grown man dreaming of another woman? If it was any other woman, it would not be a problem even if they had a dream. However, it was different when the other party was his lord. It was as serious as the beginning of the investiture of the gods, where King Zhou, or to be precise, Emperor Xinzi wrote obscene poems about Niwa. Of course, since it was a romance, it was a made-up story. Even though it was full of flaws and bugs, the plot was good and the content was novel. Feng Jin was still a fan of the novelist's book. He would always catch up on the latest chapter. King Zhou took liberties with Niwa and destroyed the Shang dynasty. If Feng Ju revealed his dream about Jiangpingji, the Feng family would probably be devastated. Fortunately, this mischievous child was not so insensible. Nonsense. Feng Ju said, It's very strange. The Lu Shi in the dream was not called Lu Shi. Her surname was Jiang, and her name was Peng. She was called Pengji. Hearing this beginning, Feng Jin felt a little hopeless. Had her younger brother read too many romance stories in the novelist's novels? What he thought about in the day was what he dreamed about at night. How could he possibly have an earth-shattering romance with goddesses with all kinds of personas? Yes, there were such stories in the market. Even though the goddesses had various personas and there was no innuendo, it could not change the core. The domineering queen fell in love with the stubborn, kind, intelligent, and virtuous scholar, Tom Su. Feng Jin still did not understand how this kind of rubbish romance passed through Wei Si's review. Could it be because of resonance? Feng Gui said nonchalantly, It's just a dream. Feng Ju said, Was it really a dream? It's too real. Everything I've experienced in my dream is as distant as the clouds in the sky, yet it's within reach. Feng Gui asked, What's the specific content? Do you want to look for Master Yuanjing to ease your mind? Feng Ju said, That Jiang family and the current Lu Shi, their temperaments are similar, but also different. Their appearance is similar, and their background is the same, but it shouldn't be like this. Even though there are only a few fragmented scenes in the dream, I feel very different. Feng Ju had only had that dream once. Even though it was only once, the details of the dream were deeply engraved in his mind. It was completely different from his usual dreams. It was this uniqueness that caught Feng Ju's attention. He was so bored that he began to analyze the difference between dreams and reality. The more he analyzed, the more confused he became. And the more confused he became, the deeper he sank into the mire. At the same time, he also discovered many things that he had never discovered before. For a period of time, he almost couldn't tell the difference between reality and dream. Before sorting out these messy things, it was impossible for him to become an official, not for anything else, but because he couldn't get over the hurdle in his heart. Even if he didn't know if he had the courage to become an official. In his dream he met Madame Jiang. In a fit of pique, he ran away from home and encountered a predicament. He entered a bandit's lair and met the bandit leader, Madame Jiang. In his dream, Madame Jiang was a bandit, and she had the air of a bandit. She often killed people with a sneer. In order to save his life, Feng Ju could only change his name to Feng San and become her incompetent advisor for a few months. Smiley face. Angle. Underscore in the dream, he was quite rational at first. Later, he didn't know what was wrong with him. After drinking a few bottles of wine, he heard that the other party was going to do something big and overturn the universe. His blood surged, and he shouted that he would use force to cut off the focus of this chaotic world. To sum it up, the two of them drank for a whole night and roared at the moon like crazy people. No, that was crazy. From the perspective of a third party, Feng Ju clearly saw the hidden shrewdness in Madame Zhang's eyes after he changed his name to Feng San in the dream. Wake up. This guy knew Feng Ju's identity from the beginning and deliberately dragged him into a trap. Because the dream was seriously fragmented, Feng Ju could only sort out a general direction. They became close friends by chance, but they were destined to go astray. When he saw Madame Jiang wearing the fur coat that represented the emperor, and wearing the 12 crowns on her head to ascend to the throne, Feng Ju could also feel the excitement and joy in his heart. It was as if all the depression that had been squeezed in his chest had been released, and his heart was surging. However, this was not a fairy tale. It was impossible for it to stop abruptly at the most beautiful moment. As Madame Jiang ascended to the throne and took control of the world, the two of them, who used to talk about everything, still had a disagreement. The source of the disagreement was the Feng family, or rather, the topic of scholars and commoners. Looking at himself in the dream, Feng Ju was a little stunned. It turned out that he also had such a side to him. After some fragmented scenes appeared, Feng Ju finally understood why he was so protective of the Feng family in the dream. Feng Ju was the only one left in the direct line of descent of the Feng family. He had no right to be willful, and could only carry the entire direct line. For the interests of the Feng family, he argued with the emperor, and did things that he once thought he would never do. Gradually, the decades of friendship were exhausted. The Feng family lost 2 elder brothers, and the Feng Ju in the dream became the person he once hated the most. It was hard to say whether the emperor had let down the Feng Ju in the dream, or Feng Ju had gone against the original intentions of the two of them. According to the dream, the cause of the death of the 2 elder brothers seemed to be indirectly related to the emperor and himself. Well, it was probably when they were vying for the throne. This was also the reason why Feng Ju was unwilling to face his 2 elder brothers all these years. 1 was enough to make him feel guilty, but 2 was simply a critical hit. Feng Jin could not help but complain. You took the dream seriously. Feng Ju said uncertainly. The dream is too real. Maybe there really is a past life, this life, and karma? According to the fragmented dream, the Jiang family and Lu Shi had a common characteristic. They were not outstanding before the age of 12, but after the age of 12, they amazed the world with a single brilliant feat. Each of them was more troublesome than the other. The Lu Shi he knew was still okay, but the Jiang family in the dream was really out of line. She became a bandit and rose to the throne. She even shot her biological father at the city gate. Yet, such a rebellious character, sigh. It seemed to be more in line with the brat Feng Ju's taste. Cough cough, this was not the point. The point was that Feng Ju asked the master if there was a possibility of possession. In the end, the master rolled his eyes at him, pointed to the sky and said, "A noble son has fallen from heaven. Mortals do not speak of heaven's secrets. Be careful not to get yourself into trouble." That meant it was possible. However, there was no proof. Feng Ju could only keep this secret and let it rot. Possession by demons and ghosts was called mischief. But how could it be called possession by a noble son sent by heaven? It was King Destiny. Feng Ju vaguely mentioned the relationship between himself and the Jiang family in the dream. Feng Jin gave him a look. If it was really a past life, wouldn't Feng Ju be in a hurry to become an official? What are you blabbering about? The two of them continued their predestined relationship. What a good plot in a novel. Feng Ju could not help but sigh. Lu Shi is not the Jiang family. The Feng Ju in the dream was the first white moon of the Jiang family. They were fair-weather friends. The Lu Shi in reality? This woman was too sentimental. Chapter 1758. What do you mean by Lu Shi is not part of the Jiang family? Feng Gui had the illusion that he was going bald from worry. His brother's illness seemed to have worsened. He went straight to the point and asked, Huaijie, tell me, what exactly do you think of the Duke of Lanting? Feng Zhu himself could not explain it clearly. Rationally, he was more inclined towards Huang Song. Even if Huang Song had already been defeated and lost his lofty ambitions, he and Feng Zhu have been friends for more than 10 years, and they still maintain contact even now. On the other hand, Feng Zhu was not familiar with the current Duke of Lanting Lu Shi, let alone his position in Feng Zhu's heart. However, when he recalled that frighteningly realistic dream, the usually decisive Feng Zhu became uncertain again. The Feng Zhu in the dream had initially given his all for the Jiang family. That dedication was even greater than what he felt for the current Huang Song. A ridiculous dream could actually have such a huge impact on Feng Zhu. The Duke of Lanting is naturally good. If he ascends to the throne in the future, he will definitely create an unprecedented prosperous dynasty. As Feng Zhu said this, fragmented scenes from the dream surfaced in his mind. The dynasty under the rule of the Jiang family was indeed very prosperous. The current Duke of Lanting Lu Shi would naturally be able to achieve that. However, there are some things that I can't explain clearly. Isn't it not bad now? When Feng Gui heard this, he really wanted to open a hole in his brother's head and open it up to see what kind of trash was inside. What did he mean by "isn't it bad now"? What the hell? How is it not bad? Did he mean that he would stay at home all day and live off his parents and family? The Feng family had used a lot of resources to nurture him. They didn't expect him to be extremely powerful. But he couldn't just stay at home and live off his parents, right? Oh, old Master Feng Run had even retired. Currently, Feng Zhu was living off his eldest brother Feng Gui. When Feng Gui thought about how he had to take care of his youngest brother's family, while he was busy with family affairs, he felt terrible. It would be very embarrassing if word got out. The third son of the Feng family had been known as a child prodigy since he was young. But after he grew up, he became mediocre. Did Feng Zhu want to become a classic example of what people said? Growing up is not necessarily good. Since it's so good, why are you still? Don't tell me you still think that Huang Bogeo can make a comeback? Feng Jin's eyes were sharp. It was as if Feng Zhu dared to nod, he would chop Huang Song with a knife and let his corpse lie on the street. As an introverted brother complex, Feng Jin had never liked Huang Song back then. Even if Huang Song tried to please him, he would not budge. Now he hated Huang Song even more. Feng Zhu was shocked and hurriedly said, "Elder brother, what are you talking about? If these words reach the ears of the Duke of Lanting, Bogeo will be in trouble." Huang Song had already given up. If Jiang Pingji became suspicious because of Feng Jin's words, that would be a tragedy. Feng Jin frowned and looked at his youngest brother with a pained expression. "You are a beautiful woman, yet you follow a thief. Huang Song was a scumbag, okay?" Feng Zhu did not know that his second brother was imagining so many things, so he had no choice but to lie. Now is not the time. Look, this excuse is exactly the same as the one Cheng Jing used back then. Feng Jin asked, "When is the time?" Feng Zhu was quick-witted and immediately thought of a way to cover up the lie. With a solemn expression he said, "I was unwilling to become an official in the past because of my old friendship with Bogeo. Moreover, I did not have much contact with the Duke of Lanting, so I planned to wait and see. Now I am still unwilling, because I am worried about something." Both of his brothers had brother complex filters. They did not see that Feng Zhu was prevaricating. Instead, they asked him with a serious face, "What are you worried about?" Feng Zhu said, "You are highly regarded by the Duke of Lanting, and you have a youthful friendship." Feng Jin interrupted him. "If it is because of this, you don't have to worry. Will you and I care about this?" He thought that Feng Zhu said this because he was worried that the two brothers would have a conflict in the future. They were of the same clan and had deep feelings for each other. They should support each other instead of opposing each other. "That is not what I mean. I am saying that you are highly regarded by the Duke of Lanting. If he wants to recommend me to become an official, he can do it at any time. There is no hurry." Feng Zhu shook his head and denied Feng Jin's words. He said, "I am worried that the Duke of Lanting's actions in the future will go against the original intentions of the Feng family. If that is the case, when the time comes, it will be too late for you to retreat. Why should I get involved in this mess?" It is better to wait and see first. When the situation has stabilized, I will see what her intentions are. I am not in a hurry to become an official. According to the dream fragment, the Feng-ju in the dream had indeed walked a different path from the emperor. Feng-jin vaguely knew what his younger brother was talking about. He frowned. At this moment Feng-gui spoke. I will take care of the family matters. Why do you need to worry about it? When Feng-gui said this, he exuded the aura of an elder. Not only was he the elder brother of his two younger brothers, he was also their clan leader. How the family would develop in the future, and what path to take were Feng-gui's worries. At the moment, it was not his two younger brothers' turn to overstep their bounds. Feng-gui was afraid that if he spoke too harshly, his two younger brothers would misunderstand and become distant from him. He added, as long as I am around, the Feng family will not make things difficult for you. Unless there was an irreconcilable conflict between the survival of the family and his two younger brothers, Feng-gui would always support his younger brothers in their endeavors. He was the elder brother, the clan leader, and most importantly their backing. When Feng-ju heard these words, a warm current flowed through his heart. It was as if this promise had transcended the barriers of time and space, and was as precious as crossing mountains and rivers. He could not help but think of Feng-ju in his dream. That white-haired Feng-ju had sighed more than once. If his two elder brothers were still alive, they would not have reached this stage. Feng-ju was intelligent, but he was not suited to be the leader of the Shi clan. His personality was also not that sophisticated. He was unable to find a balance between the emperor and the Shi clan. If it had been Feng-gui, with this elder brother's temperament and methods, the Feng family would have been able to remain calm regardless of the storm outside. Big brother. Feng-ju's voice was slightly muffled. That call was dragged out, and sounded like he was acting coquettishly. Feng-gui did not fall for this. With a cold expression he asked, what other concerns do you have? Tell me all at once. Feng-ju. Wait a minute, now is not the time to be touched. The last one is a little hard to say. It's not convenient to elaborate. Feng-ju revealed a rare look of embarrassment. Feng-gui and Feng-ju's alarm went off. Wait a minute. What the hell was this look of a young man in love? Feng-jin's mind immediately imagined the scene of his younger brother being pressed onto the ground and ravaged by Wei Xiai, while his lord cheered him on from the side. Hence Feng-jin said very sternly, Huaijie, no matter how willful you are, there is a limit. You have a family. You must not do anything that will ruin the family's reputation. Was he courting death? He had a wife, a son and a daughter, yet he dared to cheat on his lord mentally. Did he think of his lord as a lowly person? If Feng-ju dared to have such thoughts, Wei Xiai did not have to do anything. Feng-jin would first beat his younger brother to death and bury him on the spot, so that his mother could give birth to another one. Feng-ju. He only wanted to be friends with Lanting and get to know each other better. How was that ruining the family's reputation? Chapter 1759. After making such an embarrassing mistake, Feng-ju's strong desire to live came into play. He was just short of patting his chest and explaining to his two brothers that he had no romantic feelings for Jiang Pingji. Not to mention him, even Feng-ju in the dream only regarded the Jiang clan as a monarch and close friend, okay? Regardless of whether it was the Jiang family in his dream or the Duke of Lanting in reality, both were powerful figures worthy of respect. He only admired and yearned for powerful figures. He would never blaspheme them with the narrow-minded feelings of a man and a woman. Even if the dream was very fragmented, Feng-ju could feel that in the dream, he regarded the Jiang family as his only close friend and deity. He could not wait to worship them. So how could he have the delusion of being an ordinary person? No man in this world would have the guts to be lovey-dovey with her and have children with her, okay? Feng-ju was so sure that he managed to calm his two brothers down. If there's a chance in the future, I'll recommend you to the Lord. Don't let me down. It's rare for us to gather together today, and it's so lively outside. Let's not talk about these serious matters. Seeing that Feng-ju's expression did not look too good, Feng-gui took the opportunity to change the topic. Huayu, just now I saw Changsheng and the kid from Feng Zisher's family downstairs. Do you know about it? Her brother was an introverted and dull sibling complex. At the same time, he was also a misogynist. Changxing was raised in Feng Jin's arms. He didn't get close to his legitimate son. In the blink of an eye, so many years had passed, and the child was about to get married. This time, it was Feng Jin's turn to scowl. He said, "A grown girl can't be kept at home. She's already engaged, so let them do as they please." Feng Guo smiled and said, "Although Feng Zisher isn't much, his only son is excellent." His family background was a little poor, but he treated Changxing well, and the elders had nothing to say. In the Feng clan, other than the Feng clan, which had high requirements for family background, the other branches had even higher requirements for character, appearance, talent, and knowledge. Feng Jin seemed to have thought of something, and his lips curled into a smile. "That's true," Feng Ju said. "Perhaps Big Brother doesn't know this, but the children of Feng Zisher's family are indeed interesting, and quite to my liking." Feng Gui was speechless. It would have been fine if his youngest brother hadn't mentioned it, but the moment he did, he was stunned. How could Feng Yi be a gentleman if the brat Feng Ju said something to his liking? Feng Ju added, "Just now, that child made a promise to Changxing. If Feng Zisher knew about it, he would probably go crazy from anger." Feng Gui asked, "What promise?" Feng Ju said, "I don't know what Changxing said to his friend, but the kid from the Feng family said that when the two of them have children in the future, the boy will take his father's surname, and the girl will take her mother's surname. Nowadays, other than women's families or those who marry into the family, no one else would let their children take their mother's surname. Although it was said that the daughter had to follow her mother's surname, outsiders would still gossip and say that Feng Yi had married into the family of someone of a higher status." Feng Jin said, "A few kids who don't know their place." Although the current atmosphere was more open, and there was nothing wrong with a man and a woman getting along with each other, the two of them were shameless enough to talk about this before they were even married. "I don't know where Changxing heard about double households. She told Rongli that she wanted to have her own household after she got married. Later, she said that it was meaningless to be the head of a single household, so Rongli promised his daughter to follow her mother's surname. Most importantly, he had not married his daughter off yet. These two scoundrels were already discussing whether they would have a boy or a girl in the future, and what the child's surname would be." Feng Jin could not help but reflect on where his family's education had gone wrong. How could they have raised such a bold daughter? Feng Gui laughed. Children's words carry no harm. It was obvious that Feng Gui did not take the matter seriously. Instead, he took it as a joke. Little did he know that the two youngsters were serious. As a loyal brother, Feng Yi could not let the unlucky son-in-law fight alone. He should at least show some support. As a student taught by the Golden Scale Academy, Feng Yi did not have the bad habit of despising women or clinging to the family line. After all, the environment in which they grew up was relatively isolated. The academy isolated them from the outside world's influence. Whatever the Golden Scale Academy taught them, they learned it. Coincidentally, Changxing was joking with him, so he agreed to it. However, some ugly things had to be said first. It was difficult for his family to continue the family line. If there was only one daughter in the future, she might have to change her surname back to Feng. Feng Yi was young, but his thoughts were very mature. He would definitely be able to fulfill the promise he made. Changxing laughed and pounced on him. "In that case, I've profited greatly." Feng Yi caught it. "How so?" Changxing replied, "I had good taste when I was young. I picked a good man that was 1 in a million." Young aristocratic girls of the same age were married off blindly by their parents. But she was very lucky. Other than the 2 years when Feng Yi left to follow the army, she could see him every day. If they had not settled on this earlier, who knew how popular Feng Yi would be now? Feng Yi also said, "In that case, I should be the luckiest." When the two youngsters had enough of being clingy, Feng Yi received her father's black face. "You unfilial son." Feng Zhen's face was as black as a sheet. Halfway through he met Feng Jin. When he heard that his son had promised his granddaughter to someone else, he felt a pain in the ass. Feng Yi jumped to avoid her father's attack. Father, why are you so angry? Feng Zhen asked if what Feng Jin said was true. Feng Yi nodded without hesitation. Feng Zhen gritted his teeth and said, "You're really promising." Feng Yi did not reply. Feng Zhen continued, "Aren't you afraid that someone will criticize you in the future and say that you married into the family? Their mouths are on their faces. How can a son control them?" Feng Yi said, "Unless father doesn't agree?" No one knew that as the future imperial censor, Feng Yi would be lucky if he did not find people to criticize. Who would dare to criticize him in private? Feng Zhen was furious. He was not a pedantic person. If he had a grandson, it would not be unacceptable for his granddaughter to take her mother's surname. After all, the Feng family was a large family. If she took the surname Feng, her future marriage background would be more powerful. The problem was, what if I only have one daughter? Feng Zhen's health was not good, and Feng Yi was born weak and sickly. It was hard to say whether it would be difficult to have children. Feng Yi smiled and said, "Changxing is not unreasonable. If I only have one daughter, I will change my surname back." Feng Zhen. What were the brains of the youngsters these days thinking? Feng Yi continued, "If father is really worried about the family line in 100 years, why not have another child with mother while you're still young?" Feng Zhen's face darkened. He wanted to punch his own son. How could he tease his father's son like this? How could he have children so easily? How could Feng Yi be the only child? Just as the father and son were stabbing each other's hearts, hurried footsteps came from outside the room. It was Wan Xiaoer's maid. "Master Langjun, it's bad. Madam has fainted." Not only that, they also found some brown on Wan Xiaoer's lower body. But according to the time, it was not yet time for her monthly cycle. What? The father and son did not care about anything else. They hurriedly called the doctor over. The doctor's expression was solemn. After feeling the pulse for a long time, he shook his head and changed to another method. Feng Zhen and his son were frightened. After a long time, Feng Zhen was so anxious that he was sweating. The doctor withdrew his hand and asked the maid about Wan Xiaoer's period. After a long time. Chapter 1760. What do you mean I can't feel her pulse for now? Feng Zhen almost went crazy when he heard the word pregnant. But the doctor's next words hit him hard. No one would complain about having too many children. After so many years, he was a father again. He was both happy and nervous, not knowing what to do. Poor medical knowledge told Feng Zhen that a woman's slippery pulse was pregnancy. The doctor said he couldn't feel her pulse, but then said she might be pregnant. He was confused. The slippery pulse is smooth, like a pearl rolling on a jade plate. The doctor had a good temper and explained patiently, "Usually, if a woman's pulse is slippery and she is not sick, then she is most likely pregnant. But slippery pulse only appears around 2 months of pregnancy, and it can't be felt if the month is too early. I asked the maids and learned that your wife's monthly letters are always on time, never late or early. But this month's letter was a few days late. There was some brown blood on her lower body, but it didn't seem like a monthly letter. So I concluded that she might be pregnant, but the month is too early and she is tired, so there are signs of miscarriage. To be safe, you should rest in bed for the next few days and drink something to protect the fetus. After a few days, we'll see if your wife's letter comes." The doctor didn't say too much, only saying it was possible. The slippery pulse couldn't be the only indicator of pregnancy, because a man full of qi and blood could also feel it. Feng Zhen's brain stopped working, and he stood there blankly. "If the letter comes in a few days," the doctor said, "then it's not pregnancy. I will come again to feel your pulse and prescribe some medicine for your wife." A woman's letter cannot be ignored. If it ends too early or is messed up, it will easily cause the yin and yang in the body to be out of balance, causing puffiness, premature aging, and even a decrease in lifespan. Feng Zhen's mind was a mess after hearing this. Then is she pregnant or not? Feng Yi couldn't stand it anymore. Regardless of whether she is or not, let the doctor prescribe her medicine first. After all, if they didn't take good care of her, they might lose their long-awaited child. Feng Zhen was enlightened by his son and hurriedly said to the doctor, Yes. Quickly prescribe the medicine, the best medicine. The doctor was used to big storms and didn't take Feng Zhen's loss of composure to heart. When prescribing the medicine, Feng Zhen avoided his son, Feng Yi, and asked the doctor in a low voice. My wife had a child in the past, but she was tricked by a scoundrel into drinking a poisonous substance that caused her to have an abortion. Her vitality was greatly damaged, which worsened her condition of having a cold womb. If she really is pregnant this time, will it harm her body? Feng Zhen's brows were tightly furrowed, as if he was hesitating about something. It was true that Feng Zhen hoped for his legitimate son, but he also didn't want anything to happen to Wan Xiao'er. If he was really obsessed with having children, he wouldn't have only had Feng Yi for so many years. Your wife's body is indeed weaker than ordinary people, but it's not a problem for her to be pregnant. When I took your pulse just now, I found that the cold air in your wife's body was almost completely removed. It should have something to do with the years of meticulous care and recuperation. However, the doctor paused for a moment. Feng Zhen asked, "But what? Don't keep me guessing." However, if I really get pregnant this time, I must keep it. A woman having a miscarriage is very harmful to her body and vitality, especially when your wife has accidentally eaten something poisonous. If she were to have another miscarriage, her body and bones might not be able to bear it. If she can't keep this child, the chances of having another child in the future are very slim. On the other hand, if she can successfully give birth and recuperate well after the birth, it can eliminate the hidden dangers in her body. Hearing the doctor say this, Feng Zhen's anxious heart calmed down a little. What happened to me? Wan Xiao'er wanted to sit up after she woke up, but before she could do anything, Feng Zhen pushed her back down. The doctor said that your old illness is acting up again. You have to rest in bed for the next few days and rest well. You can't get up as you please. Feng Zhen didn't say what the doctor had guessed. He didn't want to rejoice for nothing and make Wan Xiao'er feel bad. It was better to wait for her body to recover and confirm her pregnancy. Wan Xiao'er said, "Before I fainted, I did feel tired all over." Did the doctor say if it was serious? Feng Zhen said, "As long as you rest well, it won't be serious. I will send people to keep an eye on you for the next few days. No matter how important it is, you have to put it aside for now." Wan Xiao'er smiled and said, "It's already the new year. How can I miss out on the social interactions between families?" Feng Zhen frowned. "That's not right. Your husband is right in front of you. How can he let you worry about these things?" She was doubting his ability. Wan Xiao'er realized that the people around her had a strange attitude towards her. Feng Zhen, on the other hand, had his eyes glued to her body. Even if she made a big movement, he would turn pale with fright. Feng Yi, that child, greeted her every morning through the door. She kept asking about her health, whether she had an appetite today, and if there was anything she wanted to eat. Needless to say, the maidservants who served her were even worse. Wan Xiao'er was speechless. She seemed to smell a conspiracy. It was as if everyone around her knew a common secret, but she was the only one keeping it from her. Could it be that she had contracted some kind of terminal illness and was about to die? Was that why Feng Zhen and his son were so paranoid? Wan Xiao'er lay on the mattress for a few days. Her body felt weak. After a few more days, she was finally allowed to sit for a while. Could it be that I really have contracted an incurable disease? Wan Xiao'er's heart sank. She never thought that she could be pregnant. The trauma left by that incident was too great. The child she had longed for so long had only been in her belly for 2 months before her birth father forced her to abort her. The doctor told her that it would be difficult for her to have another child in this lifetime. Wan Xiao'er tried to nurse her body and tried to give Feng Zhen one, but nothing happened. After the new year, Feng Yi didn't stay at home anymore. She moved to the dormitory in the Golden Scale Academy. Feng Zhen didn't agree. The dormitory in the academy was good for ordinary people, but it couldn't compare to home. Feng Yi smiled and said, "Son, you have to focus on preparing for the graduation exams. Even if you don't get first place, you have to be in the top 3. That's a double blessing." What double blessing? Of course, it meant that he did well in the exams, and his mother's pregnancy was stable. "Father, I'll leave mother in your care." Feng Yi was worried. Her father was very attentive to work, but he was careless when it came to family and personal life. When Feng Zhen heard this, he said, "A real man must keep his word. If he doesn't do well, he should repent in front of his ancestors." In the past, he only had one precious child. He couldn't hit, punish, or scold him. Now that he had a new successor, he could do whatever he wanted. Before the first month passed, the doctor came again. Feng Zhen's muscles were tense, and his forehead was covered in sweat. "How is it?" The doctor cupped his fists and congratulated. "Congratulations, sir. Your wife is already 2 months pregnant. Her pulse is strong and her pregnancy is stable." Feng Zhen was mentally prepared, but he was still overjoyed. Wan Xiao'er was dumbfounded. "What? She's pregnant?" Chapter 1761. Subconsciously, she placed her hand on her flat abdomen. Tears gathered in her eyes, and after a while, tears rolled down her cheeks. She had already given up hope. She didn't expect God to give her such a big surprise. "My wife! My good wife!" Feng Zhen wanted to hug Wan Xiao'er, but stopped halfway. He retracted his hand, afraid that he would break this porcelain doll. Feng Yi received the news and rushed back. She didn't see her mother, but saw her father sitting in the corridor. "I've given up Hanqi powder for many years, but now I'm craving it. But I can't touch it, so I got a few jars of wine." Feng Zhen saw his son, and pointed at the mat beside him, indicating for him to sit down and drink with him. "Son, there's a new heir in the Fengs." Feng Yi smiled. "Congratulations, father." Feng Zhen drank the wine and reeked of alcohol. He didn't dare to enter the room and suffocate Wan Xiao'er. He could only wait outside, suppressing the joy in his heart. When he spoke, his hands and feet were trembling. It was clear how excited he was. He used both hands to rub his cold face to calm himself down. He slowly descended from the clouds of joy to the earth. After half a jar of wine, Feng Zhen's face was stained with a drunken flush. "When I first confirmed that your mother was pregnant, I was ecstatic and relieved at the same time." Feng Zhen's way of educating his son was more modern. It was completely different from the traditional way of education. As a result, he was very close to his son, and there was nothing he couldn't say. "Father's body looks healthy, but I failed terribly when I was young. If I have a younger brother or sister, I'll have to," Feng Yi said. "Father, you're in your prime. It's too early to talk about this." Feng Zhen smiled. "It's not early. You're getting married soon. How can I not accept my old age?" The father and son were quiet for a while. Feng Zhen suddenly brought up an old story. "Do you know about Hanqi powder?" Feng Yi nodded. "I do. The headmaster of the academy said that this is harmful. Although it can treat cold illnesses, it has a huge side effect. It's not good to use it often." Feng Zhen said, "This was once popular among the aristocrats. I was addicted to it for a while, but was forced by the Lord to quit. The feeling of quitting Hanqi powder was not good. The process was like thousands of worms biting into the bones. Without perseverance, one wouldn't be able to persevere." "Father too?" Feng Yi asked. "How did father survive?" Feng Zhen smiled and said, "This is partly due to the Lord's various methods, but it is also due to your efforts." "Sons," Feng Zhen said, "when I was trying to get rid of the Hanqi powder, I was in so much pain that I wanted to die. There were a few times where I was struggling between illusion and reality. In my days, I even thought that I was using that thing, and I was walking on air. Until it seemed to be the butler's voice beside my ear that De Langjun had passed away." "The first Langjun had passed away?" Feng Yi was surprised. "Wasn't he the first Langjun of the Feng mansion?" Feng Zhen said, "I don't know how much time had passed, but the wonderful taste of the Hanqi powder slowly wore off. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the entire residence was decorated with white mourning clothes. There was a coffin in the mourning hall, and you were lying inside. The housekeeper said that first Langjun saw that I was unconscious after taking the Hanqi powder. He mistakenly thought that something had happened, and hurriedly went to look for me. However, he accidentally stepped on the green moss and slipped into the pond. After catching a cold, he passed away. That was the most crucial and painful time to abstain from Hanqi powder. Even with Jiang Pingji's help, Feng Zhen still couldn't bear it. He was in so much pain that he couldn't differentiate between reality and illusion. He mistook the hallucination of Feng Yi's death as reality. When he successfully abstained from hanqi powder, and his mind was clear, he then realized that his son was still alive and well. Feng Yi said, "Isn't your son living well in front of you, father?" Feng Zhen smiled and drank a mouthful of wine. He said, "Yes, in the blink of an eye. The skinny and weak little boy from back then is going to have a family and a career." Feng Yi said, "Not only can father see your son settle down and start a career, but you also have to plan for your younger brother or sister's marriage in the future. How hard is it to plan? Look around and see which family's boy or girl is suitable, and learn from you to abduct one." Look, Feng Zhen didn't have to worry about Feng Yi's marriage. The daughter-in-law he married was the best. This was called capability. He was more capable than his father. Feng Yi smiled and said, "What if it's the one who was abducted?" Feng Zhen said, "Remember to support your sister. If anyone dares to bully her, just beat them up." Many years later, when he recalled this conversation, he was slapped in the face. Both of his faces were slapped swollen, whether it was his future daughter-in-law or his daughter-in-law's mother. Not to mention Feng Yi. Even Feng Zhen didn't dare to say no in front of them. What a heartless world it is. Hashtag as the saying goes. People are in high spirits when they encounter happy events. Feng Zhen was beaming with joy, and was in a good mood the whole day. Has Feng Longzi changed his mind? Su Ke teased. Feng Zhen's recent behavior was getting closer to his future in-law, Feng Jin. He was as gentlemanly as he could be. Feng Zhen smiled and said, "You're going to be a father. You should set a good example for your children." Su Ke said, "Isn't your wife still pregnant?" It was too early to set a good example. Feng Zhen said, "It's not early anymore. Children can sense the outside world while still in their mother's womb. That's what Rongli taught them in the past. The results are excellent." Su Ke was speechless. He felt that Feng Yi's current appearance had nothing to do with this biological father. It was all because of her desire to survive. Feng Zhen suddenly thought of something, and asked Su Ke how old his son and daughter were. Su Ke was a smart person, and immediately understood Feng Zhen's evil intentions. He smiled and closed any door that could be coveted, not even leaving a dog hole. Feng Zhen had a new hobby. When he caught someone he was familiar with, he would ask about their children in a roundabout way. In the end, Feng Zhen the good-looking dog had his eyes on the Fu Wang twins. If it was a girl, then he would kidnap the Fu Wang twins. If it was a boy, then he would kidnap the Fu Wang twins. If it was a boy and a girl, then he would kidnap both of them. It would be a good story. The difference of a few years was not a big deal. If Fu Wang knew what he was thinking, he would probably curse. Why was Feng Longzi so fixated on his own family? Just after the first month, a fleet of cars entered the city. Jiang Pingji was flamboyant, but she wasn't one who liked to do big things. She just came back to do something. There was no need for the people to line the streets to welcome her. It would seriously affect traffic and the daily lives of the people. Therefore, when she appeared with Wei Ci and the others, everyone was dumbfounded. For example, Feng Zhen, who left early and got off work, was laughing and talking with Wan Xiu'er about what patterns to choose for the baby's clothes. Ahem. Who are you talking about? Feng Zhen's face turned pale. The person repeated, "My lord has summoned me urgently." My lord? Wasn't he in Nanxing? Feng Zhen hurriedly got up. In his haste, he almost stepped on the hem of his clothes. Quick, go there immediately. Why did he come back at this time? He just left early to slack off. Wan Xiu'er looked at Feng Zhen, who ran away like a puff of smoke. She sighed in her heart. The maid who was knitting with Wan Xiu'er said, "Why did master leave in such a hurry?" Wan Xiu'er glared at her. Chapter 1762. Jiang. Ji's surprise inspection came too suddenly, and caught everyone off guard. Almost everyone asked 3 questions from the bottom of their hearts. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Without a doubt, people like Feng Zhen, who came late and left early, complained incessantly. They wished they could step on 2 Nez's firestorm wheels, stick a pair of Lei Zhenzi's wings on their backs, and flip a godly sage's somersault cloud. Ji took the lead in front of him, and destroyed the evidence of him coming late and leaving early. Unfortunately, they didn't have the ability to do so. His lord was a doer, so it was a tragedy. When Feng Zhen arrived and met his lord's half-smiling eyes, Feng Longzi had a strange feeling that he had nowhere to hide. He forced himself to smile awkwardly but politely, and shamelessly gave Jiang Qingho a smile. Ji bowed and sat down stiffly. Feng Zhen looked calm on the surface, but he was panicking inside. He kept praying that his lord didn't notice him. Just as he was sweating anxiously, Suka's question temporarily solved the problem, making him feel like he had escaped from death. Why didn't anyone tell us in advance that our lord is coming back? Butler Suka showed a disapproving expression. His lord was so old but still so capricious. Although the situation in Dongqing was much more peaceful than other places, it wasn't safe everywhere. There were always some unruly people in some places who were uncivilized and harmed the people. If these bandits bumped into their lord and disturbed her, it would be their fault as her subjects. Not only that, the road conditions were tough. No one knew which would come first, an accident or tomorrow. If his lord had an accident because of her lack of care, Su Ku and the others couldn't absolve themselves of the blame. Jiang, Ji said, just one trip back, and the people already lined the streets to welcome us. Although it was grand, it was too disturbing. If it wasn't adjusted well, they would be crowded and worried about accidents. After thinking about it, I brought people back to the city quietly. That's why I didn't inform you in advance. Even in her era, once there was a large outdoor event, there was a chance of accidents, such as being trampled, not to mention the people of this era. Jiang, Ji Yinshu was not someone who would torture ordinary people for the sake of vanity. It was not easy for ordinary people to regain their passion for life after experiencing the chaos of war. Ji did not want to cause a commotion just for the sake of extravagance and disturb the normal lives of the people. Her reasoning was reasonable, and Su Ku and the others couldn't say anything bad about it. After all, their lord's starting point was for the good of the people. Not only could he not brag, but he also had to shut his eyes and brag as hard as he could. Since ancient times, how many people had been as considerate and meticulous as his lord who loved the people as her own children? If it was someone else's house, they would want to hear the sound of gongs and drums, and the sound of firecrackers. It would be best if everyone in the world came to worship them. Ginger, Ji used her ability to gain another wave of fans, and the filter of her fans increased by 10%. I came back this time to take care of some matters. Ginger, when Ji said this, Feng Zhen, who was below, froze in fear. His back straightened. Suka asked, what is it that the lord has to personally come back? Nowadays, there were no four-wheeled sports cars, planes, yachts, or other forms of transportation. It would take more than a month to travel from Nanxing to Dongqing. Based on his lord's journey, she spent most of the New Year's Eve on the road. If it wasn't something important, why would she suffer like this? Ginger, Ji said, it's mainly about the graduation assessment for the first-year students of the Golden Scale Academy. These people have been nurtured by the academy for many years and have been taught with great effort. Not only do the great scholars of the academy have high hopes for them, but so do I. Suka couldn't help but be moved. How could those students bear the burden of his lord's heavy efforts? For them, she had specially rushed back from the front line, where the war situation had just stabilized, and suffered for more than a month on the road. If any of these students failed the assessment, they should really die as an apology and waste so many years of education. Ginger, Ji Ye's words moved everyone, but a few insiders and the 5 million salted fish in the live stream wanted to roll their eyes. Didn't she know what she was thinking in her heart? She did come back for the graduation assessment, but her main purpose was to use this opportunity to establish the imperial examination system and give the aristocrats a general. Although they lampooned, other than Wei Ci and salted fish, no one knew how powerful the imperial examinations were. It was like a heavy punch, completely breaking the monopoly of the aristocrats and the bloodline inheritance that everyone was used to. It was groundbreaking. Because of the imperial examinations, the lofty aspirations of becoming a farmer in the morning and going to the emperor's hall in the evening could be realized. He had misjudged the hidden meaning behind this graduation assessment and was destined to be defeated by Jiang Xiang. Ji was caught unprepared. After all, it's the first time. There can't be any mistakes in all aspects. Have you prepared any rules? Remote communication was not as convenient as face-to-face communication. Ji's instructions to them were very concise, and many parts were not explained in detail. Now that they were back, they could communicate however they wanted. Su Ku and the rest had prepared everything before the new year, and now they could use it to complete their task. Ginger, Ji flipped through it casually and said, "There's nothing wrong with this set of rules, you can use it directly." The person in charge secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "But, Ginger," Ji added, and everyone's hearts that had just calmed down suddenly jumped up. She said, "There's no harm in using more formality to make the students acknowledge the Golden Scale Academy more, and to make the students who will be taking the graduation assessment more seriously." Everyone did not understand. Ginger, Ji said, "Rank the graduation assessment results, and the top 50 students will be rewarded." Reward? The chief butler who was in charge of finance frowned and asked, "How will they be rewarded? Be it the public treasury or the Lord's private treasury, they were not rich at the moment, and it was impossible to reward them generously. Moreover, the academy had more than this batch of students. They couldn't possibly reward them generously every year, right? There were 200 to 300 students in the main academy, but there were still more than 20 branches. How should they deal with this?" Suka hoped that his lord would be more clear-headed and stop squandering. She could not afford it anymore. "Ginger," Ji said in a low voice, "after enrolling, every student will receive a student token as proof of entering and leaving the Golden Scale Academy. The student's basic information will be recorded on it. Let's do it this way. The top students who graduate this time will receive a custom-made graduation token. The first 3 will be forged with silver, the 4th to the 50th will be forged with bronze, and the 50th and above will be forged with wood." The so-called graduation token was the graduation certificate, the proof that the students had completed their studies in the Golden Scale Academy. Although this thing was useless and worthless, it was an honor. In this era where honor and spirit were important, a small token could increase the sense of belonging a lot. After Suka heard this, he calculated the cost and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The cost was not high. The most expensive was 3 silver tokens, and the size of the token could be discussed. However, Suka was probably happy too early. Ginger, Ji took the opportunity to mention the concept of graduation uniforms. "Well, to be honest, the cost of this uniform was much more expensive than any brand." Chapter 1763. Although he said so, as a good subordinate of his master, Suka naturally had to do it for her. He casually agreed, but his heart was bleeding with heartache. After finishing this matter, Jiang Yushu said. Ji Yinshu then asked about the situation in Dongqing over the past 2 years. Even though Su Ku and the others would send him news every month, it was still not as detailed as knowing it himself. She was able to fight at the front line with peace of mind, largely thanks to this group of meritorious soldiers stationed in the rear. Ji couldn't do anything at the front line. In terms of opportunities to make contributions, the front lines naturally had the most opportunities. Otherwise, why would those generals want to go to war? However, Su Ku, Feng Jin, and the others were able to calm down and defend the rear, so that she did not have to worry about anything. It was really commendable. Ginger, as a mature master, Ji would naturally not neglect this group of people. Raising officials was like raising a house cat. From time to time, one had to pacify them. Even if they were not given much to eat, they would still diligently contribute. Not getting a response for one's efforts was the most disappointing. In the words of a certain salted fish who had resigned due to being wronged in the workplace, he could grit his teeth and bear with the grievances of his body, but not his heart. Ginger, Ji kept on praising her. Su Ku and the others didn't show it on the surface, but they were extremely pleased. Feng Jin said in a reserved manner, "It's my duty to take care of the rear for my lord. I don't deserve such praise. Modesty is a virtue, also known as showing off. Ginger? When Ji returned, it was rather late. The sky darkened rather early in this season. Seeing that it was getting dark outside, she suggested for everyone to return first. If there was anything else, they could discuss it the next day. More than 20 people bowed and were about to leave. Ji suddenly called out to a certain someone. Zisher, stay here. Feng Zhen's back stiffened, and he thought to himself, the heavens want me dead. Feng Jin, who had heard the commotion, glanced at Feng Zhen, then looked at Wei Ci. His expression did not show, but there was some doubt in his eyes. How rare. In the past, it was always Zishao who stayed behind. But now it's Zisher. Su Ke was a serious person, but when he said that, it was obvious that he was snickering, which sounded indecent. Feng Jin said, who asked Feng Zhen to fish in troubled waters? Is it reasonable to be late and leave early? He was lucky not to be discovered, but he deserved to be caught by the Lord. Feng Jin really didn't want to admit that this guy was his future in-law. Fortunately, his future son-in-law didn't have Feng Zhen's bad habits. Su Ke stifled a laugh and said, my luck is terrible. Feng Jin said, I personally think that this fellow has been blinded by happiness recently. Let Lord teach him a lesson so that he can sober up. What's wrong with being a father at this age? It's not like he's in his 70s or 80s. Why would he be happy to have a son? Look at how he's floating in the sky. Su Ke said gloatingly. I'm just afraid that my lord's methods have scared him, and he's in trouble. Who's going to do all those things then? Sure enough, the friendship between colleagues was all fake. It was all plastic friendship. Feng Zhen, who had been asked to stay, understood for the first time what it meant to be isolated and helpless. Ginger? Ji Yunshu was just trying to scare him. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, she finally spoke. Of course, he wasn't going to ask Feng Zhen why he had left so early. No matter how reckless Feng Longzi was, he still needed his dignity. Ji Yunshu would not embarrass his own people over such a small matter. I heard that your wife is pregnant. Feng Zhen was stunned. He didn't know how his lord knew. She had only been in the city for a short while. But she actually knew about such a small matter. It could be seen that she was very attentive. Thus, Feng Zhen's nervousness disappeared and was replaced by warmth. Yes, but the doctor said it's still early, and there were signs of miscarriage before, so we have to be more careful in the first few months. Ginger? Ji congratulated Feng Zhen. With the exception of a few, most of the officials were the sons and daughters of the first wife. Even Su Ke, who had been separated from his wife for many years, was working hard to catch up. Now he had a son and 2 daughters. Only Feng Zhen was pitifully small, with only one son, Feng Yi. Although this son was quite good at fighting, and the other children were no match for him, he was still at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, and his ability to resist risks was also weak. If anything happened to Feng Yi, Feng Zhen would become a middle-aged man who had lost his only child. Do you have a name? Feng Zhen's nerves were taut. When he thought of his family's indescribable ability to come up with names, his heart trembled. I still don't know if it's a boy or a girl. How should it be named? Ginger? Ji assertively said. The boy will be named Feng Yu. You can name the girl whatever you want. Feng Zhen looked at Jiang. Ji looked as if she had seen a ghost. The child in his wife's womb was his. Why did his lord's attitude make it seem like it was hers? What kind of position did that place him, her biological father, in? Feng Zhen wanted to resist in his heart, but his body was unusually honest. You. This is a pretty good name. This subject thanks Lord on behalf of Lin for bestowing this name upon him. Feng Zhen. QAQ. Ing. If he didn't let his father experience the joy of naming, he would have the illusion that his son was born for nothing. However, speaking of which, why does this Feng Yu sound so familiar? Feng Zhen also had a superb memory. After he returned home, he tossed and turned restlessly. Finally, in the middle of the night, he woke up in shock. Don't let your Feng Yu harm my yin. Back then, Li Kuan Yu at the wedding banquet with Shang Guanwan. Wei Ci's drunken words could be heard clearly. Scared the hell out of me. Feng Zhen's movements were so loud that it startled Wan Xiao. What do you mean by scaring someone to death? Did you have a nightmare? Her voice was filled with fatigue. Feng Zhen said, Madam, go to sleep first. Your husband just suddenly remembered that Wei Zixiao is a quack. Wan Xiaoer's eyes were filled with hidden bitterness. His beautiful wife was sleeping next to him. But this guy was dreaming of his colleague Wei Ci in the middle of the night? Thinking of Wei Ci's face, Wan Xiaoer sighed. All right to Feng Zhen. Wei Ci's face was indeed quite lethal. Sleep. Feng Zhen murmured. That can't be. Did he know something back then? After a while, Feng Longzi's attention was focused on one point. Who is Yanner? Wan Xiaoer opened her eyes and looked at her husband quietly. I also want to know who Yanner is. Can't a pregnant woman sleep in the middle of the night? Feng Zhen wanted to say something but stopped himself. Sullenly, he lay down and covered her with the blanket. He reached out and tucked her in so that the cold air wouldn't flow in. Epsilon equals omega epsilon. Sigh. What if it really was a son? Feng Zhen thought about it and reached out to rub Wan Xiaoer's belly. He murmured, Feng Yu is Feng Yu. It's not bad if it's a son. Carrot. If that quack Wei Ci's words were accurate, this child of his could marry the Empress concubine in the future. If that was really the case, he would be rich. Little did he know that Jiang Ji was thinking the same thing. Even Feng Yu from Zisher's family is here. Zixiao has to work hard to catch up. His lord's body temperature was so hot that it seemed like it could scald a person. In the darkness, Wei Ci panted lightly. He felt rather helpless. Before saying this, could you not take out that little thing? Chapter 1764. As for having children, Jiang Ji really did not have any obsession. Shouldn't she pay a sum of money to the child-rearing organization and go to the incubator to collect it after some time? The old general laughed coldly and snuffed out Jiang. Wake up, you're in the backward ancient times, not the Federation. Speaking of which, why don't you mail me an artificial incubator? It's so tiring to carry a few kilograms of child in my stomach. It's pressing on my internal organs and nerves. Just thinking about it is tiring. I want to feel my conscience and praise the Federation's decision. Banning maternal pregnancy is an epoch-making law. After squeezing Wei Ci dry yesterday, she was as lazy as a salted fish today, perfectly acting out the guyu lie that salted fish talked about. Oh, coupled with her half-closed dead fish eyes, she instantly replaced the guyu lie as the new generation of emoticons. Yuaba. Heh, then how are you going to explain to outsiders about the child? His stomach hasn't even grown, and he's carrying a big fat baby every 3 to 5 months. How are you going to convince everyone that this is their young master? In the eyes of outsiders, this is Jiang Ji adopted a child from who knows where. There's no guarantee of quality. Who knows if he's a good master? Jiang Ji heard this and thought she had a chance. She quickly sat up like a carp, sweeping away her previous dispiritedness and laziness. Can you mail it now? If it could be mailed, it would be perfect. Everyone could create as many young masters as they wanted. They could form a football team every year. Yuaba, no give up. There's no such thing. Jiang. When Ji heard this, he rolled his eyes and continued to lie on the ground. He was like a punctured balloon, instantly deflating. Old General, maternal pregnancy is against the law. How can I break the law knowingly? Jiang Ji couldn't do anything about it. But as a high-ranking official in the Federation military, she couldn't do that. Yuaba, nonsense. You can just say that you want to see others scratching their ears and cheeks. Why do you have to make such a big deal out of it? Every time people talked about young masters, Jiang Ji would look like she was watching a good show. Wasn't she afraid that things would turn out badly? Follow Jiang. As Ji grew older, the problem of having children would become more and more serious. People's hearts would waver, and something might happen. Old General kindly remind Jiang Ji said that, but this damn child refused to listen. She laughed and joked. Am I such a childish person? Of course. She wouldn't do something pointless for the sake of such a vile interest. If he repeatedly made his own people worry, he would become bitterly disappointed as time went by. She had been dragging on and refusing to have children. Firstly, she wanted this life to be as close as possible to the previous life in Wei Ci's memory. She wanted Feng Yu to be Feng Yu and Jiang Yan to be Jiang Yan. even though she knew that this was impossible. Even if the parents were the same, and the embryos were conceived at the same time, it was impossible for them to be exactly the same, let alone at different times. He was afraid that apart from the name, everything else would be different. As a human of the Federation, deep down, Ji Yinshu did not have any feelings or obsession towards the bloodline of his children. If children were a form of comfort to Wei Ci, it did not matter whether he gave birth sooner or later. Apart from this, she had an even more important reason. Ginger, the body that Ji was currently using, Lu Shi, was born into a landowning household. Even though she had no connection with the Lu family and had left the sect in her early years, she was still a member of the Lu family. Ginger, Ji Yinshu wanted to see when they could no longer sit still. If they could no longer sit still, she could take the opportunity to end things with the Lu family and restore her original name. Although a name was just a code, and it was common to change one's surname, it was still quite annoying to be called Lu Shi all day long. The traces left behind in the future also belonged to Lu Shi. All the rise and fall of glory and disgrace had nothing to do with Ginger. Ji had nothing to do with it. This was intolerable. Your Abba. TSK. I remember someone once said that official titles were worthless. Jiang. Ji laughed and said, nonsense. Isn't leaving a name in history to show off to the future generations? Otherwise, what's the point of living? Your Abba. Ha. A capricious woman. Jiang. Ji said, children are indeed troublesome. I don't even have the experience of raising a child, let alone giving birth. Your Abba. It's fine as long as your little man knows how to raise children. I don't think anyone expects you to teach children well. Jiang. Ji Yinshu was not a teacher. No matter how good a seedling was, it would be a waste in her hands. She might even mislead the children. I said that he's an adult. What little man and little man? Listening to it, she had the illusion that she was raising a wolf puppy. Your Abba. Ha! Do you need me to go through the definitions of adulthood and underage in the federal law? Jiang. Ji was speechless. She could not continue the topic. She wanted to continue lying in bed, but the chores outside would not give her the chance. I thought that a winner in life should be able to earn mountains of gold and silver without doing anything. Jiang. Ji Yinshu was not afraid of the cold, but she did not like the feeling of being surrounded by cold air. Even if there was carbon in the room, it was easy to be poisoned by carbon monoxide because of poor ventilation. It was much colder inside than under the covers. She muttered and complained. I'm already the most powerful feudal lord in the world, and I'm only one step away from becoming the emperor. Why do I have to worry about selling noodles to earn money from selling cabbage? I wake up earlier than chickens, sleep later than dogs, eat worse than pigs, and work more than donkeys. If one were to talk about envy, Jiang? Ji Yinshu was most envious of those muddle-headed rulers who used all the resources in the world to support one person. There were 3,000 beauties in the harem, and it would take 10 years to sleep with one of them in a day, of course. This was purely the imagination of poor scholars. Just like the joke that the salted fish told her a while ago. The peasants guessed that the emperor used a golden hoe to work in the fields, and the empress used a golden mallet to wash clothes. It was impossible to have 3,000 beauties, but it was possible to have dozens of them. Jiang. Ji Yinshu only had Wei Ci, and the jealousy of a young man was great. As for her, carrying a golden hoe to work every day was not as good as working in the fields. The salted fish were not happy. Tuta Faccio. Streamer, before you say this, feel your conscience first, and then look at Zixiao and the rest, okay? If it was Jiang, Ji Yinshu could still earn some cabbage money, but Wei Ci and the rest would be spending their youth and energy instead. Jiang. Ji Yinshu was too lazy to look at them. This was clearly her live stream, but the fans were all other people, and from time to time, they would diss her for their idols. Forgive her for being blunt, but the idols that these salted fish used to be fans of were now middle-aged uncles in their 30s. Lanting Xiangxue. That's the charm of a mature man. She didn't know if that group of people had good control over their bodies, or if they ate too little meat, but almost none of them had put on weight in their middle ages. They didn't have beer bellies, baldness, or greasy skin. They were still elegant, cultured, and tasteful. Haha to be Jiang. When Ji Yunshu saw Huang Song, she took back her words. She had been busy the entire afternoon, and Jiang? Ji Yunshu couldn't be bothered to get the kitchen to cook, so she found a restaurant to eat something, and ended up meeting an old friend. She glanced at Huang Song's stomach, then at his face and chin, feeling very sad. Did you cultivate the 9 return to 1 grand technique? Huang Song was very puzzled. What 9 return to 1 grand technique? Jiang? Ji Yunshu stared at his stomach. The muscles in your body have fused together. Huang Song. Feng Ju, who had just come out of the private room, happened to hear this flirtatious remark. Chapter 1765. The plump Huang Song wasn't actually that fat. It was just that the management of his body had slackened, causing him to have a double chin, a bigger face, and a small belly. This image diluted the sharpness of the youth and added a bit of benevolence. Ji was unable to describe her current feelings. Many years ago, Huang Song, this fellow, had also been riding horses and snuggling up to women. What a bright young man he was. Now that the edges and sharpness of his body had been polished off, although he had become benevolent, to those who were familiar with his former appearance, it still made them feel a little sad. Ginger? Ji Yunshu would not grieve over the changing seasons. Her emotions only lingered for a second or two before disappearing completely. Huang Song added, "This is the trend pursued by scholars nowadays. You're as thin as a bean. What do you know?" Ginger? Ji Yunshu was surprised. Had Huang Song rebuked her? Although those famous people have nothing to do all day and seem to be a pain in the ass, there's nothing wrong with their eyes. Why would they chase after plump bodies? Ginger? Ji was shocked. She had only been away from Wanzhou to fight in the war for a few years. That group of young, middle-aged, and old people who spent their days eating, drinking, and having fun and gathering people to mourn the passing of spring had actually changed their taste in beauty. Compared to before, Huang Song's attractiveness had dropped by more than 20%, and this was still considered a trend? That's right. The modern trend was the fashion circle, while the current trend was the celebrity circle. Whatever the celebrities, socialites, in the celebrity circle chased after, the direction of the trend would shift. That year when Hanshi powder was popular, it was a trend in the circle of celebrities to avoid bathing to catch lice. They preferred fair skin, long legs, and beautiful features. Let's not talk about the future. When GE went to war in the past, she remembered that it was popular among the celebrities to have thin waists and big breasts, regardless of gender. Plump is popular now. Judging from Huang Song's reaction, it seemed that his style was quite popular. It should be a model in the celebrity circle. However, this was not the main point. The main point was, "Who are you calling beans?" Huang Song snorted. He didn't need to say anything. At this moment, Jiang Yu, who usually did not like to talk to him, was stunned. Ji's Feng Ju came out to be the peacemaker at this moment, dispelling the smoke with just a few words. "Ginger?" Ji Yunshu rolled her eyes and agreed to Feng Ju's suggestion to let her in for a free meal. Anyway, she would not be the one paying the bill. Huang Song would become poor because of her. After the three of them took their seats, Feng Ju smiled and said, "Speaking of which, this trend is thanks to the Duke of Lanting." "Ginger?" Ji said. "What does that have to do with me?" She was 1.75 meters tall, well-proportioned and tall. She had never known fat in her previous lives. How could they slander her like this? Feng Ju said, "Does the Duke of Lanting remember the public toilets that you ordered to be built?" Ginger? Ji Yunshu frowned. Although many public toilets had been built, and many cities were gradually improving, they were still public toilets. Even if there were specialized people to manage and clean them, the smell was still terrible. All in all, the mention of public toilets brought up a bad image. "What's the connection?" Feng Ju said. "The Duke of Lanting built the public toilets for many purposes. The waste from the public toilets was used to fertilize the fields, indirectly increasing the output of the fields. The few livestock farms built outside the city were also on the right track. Even the common people could eat 2 or 3 meals of meat every month. not to mention the families who were better off. With good food and a comfortable life, his body naturally became heavier. This has something to do with the fact that famous men don't like being thin, but like being plump. Back then, Feng Zhu had recommended his classmate, Do Shi, through his father, who was also the big boss of the farming family. With his knowledge in Jiang Ji's advanced farming management philosophy, he vigorously reclaimed the wasteland and improved the fertility of the farmland. In addition, the heavens had given him face in the past few years, and the fields had a bumper harvest every year. The food harvested was not only enough to supply the frontline soldiers in battle, but there was still a lot of surplus in the homes of the common people. With better living conditions and better food and living conditions, wouldn't their bodies become fat? For the common people, being fat was not ugly. Instead, it was a symbol of wealth. It proved that there was plenty of surplus food in the house, and that the living conditions were good. Those celebrities who chased after a thin and morbidly thin body obviously had nothing better to do, and were tormenting themselves. Due to the influence of Wanzhou's culture, these idling famous men also changed their usual preferences, and there was a wave of plump people. Jiang Ji smiled and said, "In that case, this is indeed due to me. I'll accept it." However, Huang Song's meal was tasteless and tasteless. In the end he asked Jiang Ji, "Do I really not look good like this?" Jiang Ji said, "It's easy to get rich when you're fat, and it costs a lot of fabric." Huang Song was speechless. A few arrows pierced through him in succession. Jiang Ji added, "I remember why. He's also a famous man. Don't you see that he's no different from before? Don't just follow the trend of famous men. Famous men's mouths are used to run trains." Huang Song was speechless. He turned to look at his little friend. He was still as handsome as ever. Huang Song looked down at the small puddle on the back of his hand, and felt even more stifled. Feng Zhu secretly glanced at Jiang Ji. Didn't say anything. This meal was paid for by Feng Zhu. This Feng Sanling was rich, but he wasn't poor. Ji ate 7 or 8 times more than what he and Huang Song paid for the meal. But he didn't even frown. Jiang Ji felt at ease. On the way back, he pondered about what was wrong. Feng Sanling is expressing his goodwill to me, but he doesn't look like he has any plans to become an official. If he was sincerely convinced by Jiang, with Feng Zhu's pride, he wouldn't want to go to Jiang. Ji had a good impression of him in front of Ji, so that he could make a good start. He would most likely follow Feng Jin's path, and start from the bottom, instead of landing out of nowhere. Therefore, Feng Zhu's display of goodwill was a little strange. Jiang Ji turned around to test Feng Jin. She asked if his bratty brother was agitated, or if he was being pressured by his family. Feng Jin was silent for a long time after hearing this. He said with a strange expression, "Perhaps. Why? He just wants to be friends with you, my lord." Jiang Ji was speechless. Was he playing a friend? Feng Jin said awkwardly, "Why? This child has always liked to think that he's smart and a little naive. My lord, please don't be calculative with him." No matter what, he would first belittle his brother, lest his lord got angry, and find someone to settle scores with. Jiang Ji smiled and said, "This friend is interesting. He's worth befriending." It was not impossible to be purely friends without mixing interests and politics. That night Jiang Ji asked Wei Xi about Feng Zhu. She only knew that Feng Zhu was her first aid in Wei Xi's life. But in this life, this guy followed Huang Song. Ji did not expect to poach him, so she did not ask about many things in detail. Now that she was interested, she wanted to know more about Feng Zhu. Wei Xi let out a sigh and briefly explained what had happened. Jiang Ji pinched her chin and said, "Why does it sound like my life was a tragedy?" Wei Xi said, "After all, Feng Zhu was born in the Feng family. No matter how rebellious he was, the family was his natural responsibility. In order to protect the family, Feng Zhu might not feel good about going against his former best friend, who was now the emperor. What about you?" Wei Xi smiled very sadly. "Isn't my clan leader the lord?" Chapter 1766. Ji looked at the middle-aged Huang Song, then turned to look at Zixiao. "Jiang Ji realized that someone was still too thin. Hence, she had a new hobby recently. She would feed Wei Si when she had nothing to do. In the words of the salted fish in the live streaming room, it was a large-scale scene of dog abuse. Yet, they watched happily and wished they could die of sweetness. For example, the following scene. Is it sweet? Jiang? Ji stuffed a lemon-flavored lollipop into Wei Si's mouth when he wasn't paying attention. Wei Si had recently gotten used to the strange sweet food that his lord had gotten from somewhere. It looked strange but tasted very good. He was stunned for a while and was about to taste it carefully. He didn't expect someone to take the lollipop away and lean forward to kiss it. She smacked her lips and said, "It does taste quite sweet." Wei Si was speechless. His lord's various flirting methods were really unbearable. Wei Si was not used to it at first, but he calmed down after a few times. Jiang. Ji returned the lollipop to him and said with a smile, "It's a new flavor. I heard it's a limited edition Christmas." Although Wei Si was in his early 30s, he actually liked sweet food. However, the sugar-making technology in this era was very backward. Artificial sugar was mostly made from starch. The sweetness was not strong and impure. The finished product was not easy to preserve, and the production was very low. Even landowning households couldn't eat sweets as they pleased. For example, stone honey, a solid product made from sugar cane, was still a precious tribute during the Great Xia dynasty. Not many people had the right to enjoy it. Now the technology had improved a little, but the supply was still limited. Those who were not rich were not qualified to enjoy it. Jiang. The snacks that Ji took out were bought by the old chief. They were beautifully packaged and had a wide variety. Wei Si was not used to this kind of thing at first, but he deeply liked it after eating a few more pieces. Jiang. Ji was also happy to feed him. It sounds very precious. Wei Si did not ask where these things came from and deliberately ignored this point. His lord was special. There was no need to make a fuss if she had some inhuman means. Jiang. Ji said, "It's said that Christmas is a foreign festival. The products produced during the festival are produced and sold in limited quantities." Wei Si asked a question that came from the bottom of his heart. "Sell it better?" "No, sell it more expensive." Jiang. Ji Yinshu said, "It's just a gimmick. It's nothing more than making use of people's mentality of the rarer something is, the greater its value, to inflate the price of the item. It's still the same thing, just that it's being sold under a different name, and the packaging material is different." Wei Si was a little surprised when he heard that. He did not expect that there was such a business method. The merchant who came up with this method is indeed a genius. This seemed like a strategy used by strategists to plot against the human heart. Ginger? Ji laughed. Aren't businessmen supposed to earn the most money with the least cost? If you're not talented, how can you earn money? Wei Si said. But if that's the case, isn't it too unfair to the people who sold the goods? It is not advisable to disrupt the market price. Merchants made too much money. They could earn several years' worth of ordinary people's money just by reselling their goods. Wouldn't the people be jealous? At that time, every household would follow suit. Who would be willing to farm in peace? Without food production, the entire society would be in chaos, and there would be endless troubles. Wei Si knew that promoting commerce was beneficial to economic development, but he also had to restrain the merchants to prevent them from harming the country. If it's a healthy competition, it's fine. Ji said, I have the intention to support the merchants, but I won't let them bite me when they grow too big. From the beginning, I have to set up complicated rules so that they are always under my control. The people's agricultural taxes should not be too high or too heavy, but tax is the foundation of a country. If the taxes related to agriculture are too little, it will naturally have to be made up from other places. Wei Si laughed. My lord is indeed not willing to suffer losses. Jiang, Ji said, of course I'm not willing to suffer losses no matter what. She saw that Wei Si loved sweets so much, and an idea popped up in her mind. She could not always let the old chief buy on her behalf. Who knew what messy place he would go next time? And what would happen if there was no sugar? She might as well develop it herself and improve the current sugar production process. When Wei Ci heard that his lord wanted to expand the scale of sugar cane cultivation, he suddenly had a déjà vu. My lord is only doing this because of Ci. This is not appropriate. Jiang Ji laughed. Sugar should be a snack suitable for all ages. Not only do you like it, children like it even more. I like it too. The production of this thing is small, and not many people are qualified to enjoy it. If it can be produced on a large scale, the sales will definitely not be bad. Wei Ci said. But this thing is not a necessity. How can we waste precious arable land for it? Jiang Ji said. Look at Wanzhou. Because the people's lives are rich, the circle of celebrities now has a trend of plentiful beauty. From this, the better the people's lives are, the more they need to enjoy life, not to eat and wear warm clothes. I'm doing this because I want to put it in the private treasury. After a few wars, the private treasury is so poor that even mice can't take a fancy to it. How are we going to raise children in the future? Even if the country had not yet been founded, everyone knew that Jiang Ji would definitely become the empress. Once she became the empress, she would be part of the royal family. In the past, the emperor's expenses were linked to the national treasury. Since Ji's debut, her private and public treasury had been independent. It would be the same in the future when the country was founded. The royal family would spend money on smuggling, and the national treasury would not be touched to prevent the emperor from being extravagant and causing chaos in the country. In this way, whether the royal family lived well would depend on whether the private treasury was plentiful. Jiang Ji naturally had to think of a way to get a stable income for the private treasury. She felt that promoting snacks was not bad. She could benefit the people's taste buds and earn some money. Jiang Ji analyzed for Wei Ci. You can't just look at the surface. You have to look deeper. The birth of a new industry will also create a large number of jobs, so that the idle people can settle down. With something to look forward to, they naturally won't think of creating trouble. Don't look at it as a small piece of candy. It can feed thousands of people. Zixiao, don't you think I'm right? I'm really not using my official position for personal gain. At most, she could get inspiration from him. While benefiting the people, she could also satisfy the little man's desire for good food. Wei Ci was speechless. He clearly knew that his lord had made up this excuse, but this person had the ability to make her words sound convincing. The so-called sugar in this era was mostly maltose, commonly known as maltose or marinated sugar. The other was maltose. Sugar was made from sugar cane, but it was very rare because sugar cane was precious, and the production was low. Only the nobles had the right to enjoy it. Jiang Ji had made this decision on a whim, but the people under her could only bitterly carry it out. There was no choice. They couldn't win against their lord. His lord wrote down in detail how to grow sugar cane, how much sugar cane could be produced from 1 mu of land, how to extract the syrup to make sugar, and the production process of various flavors of sugar. At the end, there was a large analysis. She calculated how many jobs this industry could create, how many people could have jobs, and the final profit. It was reasonable and well-founded. Chapter 1767. By the way, sugarcane cultivation requires climate. Send someone to Nanxing to find a suitable place. That place has experienced war. There are poor refugees and idle wastelands everywhere. It's more convenient to recruit people and circle the sugarcane cultivation area. Who's going to do this? Jiang Ji glanced around and randomly picked a few newcomers with better reputations and honest personalities. She sent them on a business trip. The newcomers were stunned by this pie that fell from the sky. They were so happy that they didn't know what to do. Did they think that this was Jiang? Ji Yinshu valued the performance of their abilities. Ji felt that this matter was not difficult. Sending capable people out was like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. It was a waste of human resources. Yes, this was a beautiful misunderstanding. It also made the newcomers more motivated. Feng Ju smiled and teased. Second brother, how do you feel after meeting such a master? He heard that Jiang Ji had gathered everyone to announce the matter of planting sugarcane. From the proposal to the implementation, it only took a day. Such high efficiency was not only reflected in Jiang Ji's power and influence among the officials. At the same time, it also showed her ability. She used absolute facts to convince everyone, and imperceptibly gave everyone the impression that she was right, and there was no need to refute. She was not an incompetent master who made the officials clean up the mess on a whim. They just had to believe in her. With such a wise master, ordinary mediocre people naturally yearned for it. However, for those who were full of talent, it was a little depressing, because this master had done what they should do. She had blocked their path, and almost made them have nowhere to go. Sugarcane was originally a luxury item. If it was planted on a large scale, the profits could be imagined. According to the normal process, it would take at least half a month of discussion before a decision was made. In the end, it only took a day. The detailed procedures were not given by the officials, but by the master. Feng Jin said, Very tiring. High efficiency did not mean less work. How many days did Feng Jin take off in a year? Every day when he opened his eyes, his mind was filled with all kinds of work. He was busy with this and that like a spinning top. Feng Ju said, It's indeed tiring. Feng Jin could not help but roll his eyes at his brother. His gaze was saying, You're a famous scholar who eats and drinks all day. How would you know how tiring it is? Now that you know you're tired, why don't you share your brother's burden? Feng Ju said, How? He had made it very clear last time that his elder brother would not persuade him to become an official. So how could he share his elder brother's burden? Feng Jin said, You don't have to worry too much about Changsheng. Take care of my niece and nephew. Little brat. Huang Song's daughter was being raised as a precious pearl, but his own nephew and niece did not care about it. Was he siding with an outsider? Go take care of the baby. When Feng Ju heard that, his face darkened. His own children, Huang Song's youngest daughter, and his second brother Feng Jin's 2 sons. Was he being treated as a kindergarten teacher? He couldn't do that. If he did, he'd be done for. Because there were no effective contraceptive measures, pregnancy could only be given birth. Feng Jin and Wei Jingxian were young and healthy. In recent years, other than Changxing and the eldest son, they had another son. Who knew if there would be 2 more in another 2 years? Heir Xiong and Heir Sa were still young. There were many couples in their 30s who had children. You're not willing? Feng Jin raised his eyebrows. Feng Ju forced a smile, and resisted the urge to vomit blood. How can that be? My 2 nephews are as smart as second brother when he was young. I like them very much. Don't give birth, he couldn't handle it. As a talented person with a high IQ, Feng Ju didn't want to take care of babies for the rest of his life. Little did he know that his good sister-in-law, Wei Jingxian, thought the same. She married Feng Jin, and gave birth to 3 children. The burden of childbirth was too great, and it took up too much energy. Now she was a little worried. Because of this, she even had the idea of letting Feng Jin take a concubine. Landowning women let their cheap concubines share the burden of childbirth, and there were many who treated them as BYT. The Feng family was born in a prestigious family, and their ancestors were prominent. It was not out of line for Feng Jin to take a concubine. However, this idea only flashed through her mind once before it was extinguished by her. Wei Jingxian was not an ordinary landowning woman. She had worked in the government office for so many years. At the same time that her ability was trained, she had also climbed to a high position. Her thinking was completely different from when she was still married. Her husband was not heaven. He belonged to her alone. Whoever touched him would die. However, pregnancy was really a burden. Wei Jingxian could only privately send people to find effective contraceptive methods. Feng Jin also knew about this, but he turned a blind eye to it. 2 sons and a daughter. All 3 of them were born by the legal wife. This was not a small family. Having more children would also be a burden. The Feng family did not pay attention to having more children, and they had always valued quality over quantity. After all, the resources given to each child by the family were limited. Having 1 more child meant that the other children would be given more. In the end, all the children would not be able to achieve anything. Why bother? Obviously, not everyone had the same awareness as Feng Jin. More people still wished to have more children and more blessings. However, they did not consider the burden and pressure that having more children and blessings would bring to the women. Jiang. When Ji passed by, she heard the gossip of the women's department. The original members of the women's department were a group of literate women who were rescued when they conquered Xiangyang district. After so many years, some of them found a home and left, but there were also some who stayed after marriage and became the pillars of the family. There were also new people who filled in here. They belonged to a special department with real power. Jiang. Ji heard them chatting during lunch break. When they privately complained about childbirth, she revealed a thoughtful expression. Old leader Jiang? Ji stuck out her buttocks. The old leader knew what she was going to do and immediately rejected her. Your Abba. Heh, if you don't want to be taught a lesson, I advise you to keep your thoughts to yourself. The last time I bought a few hundred boxes, I don't know how many he used. Old leader, what are you talking about? I'm a decent person. Ji looked serious. I'm asking you if there are rubber trees over there. She would rather produce it herself than rely on the old leader to buy it for her. Jiang. Ji's history was not very good, but she remembered that the original BYT was a latex product. It would definitely not be a problem to research in this direction. Thinking of this, she felt a headache coming on. Once a woman became pregnant, not only would the woman be punished, but the man who impregnated the woman would also be thoroughly investigated. If the two were a couple, both of them would be sent to jail for a period of time, and the fine would be very heavy. If the woman's pregnancy was not voluntary, the time the man would spend in jail would be based on the woman's age. The minimum would be 10 years. The younger the woman was, the longer she would spend in jail. The maximum could be up to 100 years. The man would be sentenced to chemical castration. Even if he was released from jail, he would wear a special ring on his hands and feet that could not be removed for life. Once the distance between him and the woman was less than a certain distance, it would sound a warning, and he would be electrocuted. Under such circumstances, the contraceptive surgery in the federal hospital was especially popular. Gradually, there was no market for adult products. Developed to Jiang? In Ji's era, she only knew about BYT from textbooks and documents. She knew that BYT in the early days of interstellar life was extracted from some kind of interstellar creature. It was easy to use and could be perfectly degraded without polluting the environment. But the earlier BYT, as a bad student, she only knew that it was made of latex _smiley face, angle, _your Abba. Jiang Xiaojiu, you've really opened my eyes. Asking her to buy rubber trees just to make BYT. Chapter 1768. Is the old general praising me or insulting me? Jiang. Ji's intuition was leaning towards the latter. She couldn't help but feel wronged. Although adult products were private items that were difficult to talk about in this era, the old general was from the same era as her. How could he be so shy as to avoid talking about it? Don't underestimate the adult industry. It was a fertile land that had yet to be developed. There were huge business opportunities. Your Abba. Hee, what do you think? What do you think is worthy of my praise? No matter what rubber is used for, it's more useful than torturing BYT, right? The old general didn't think of Jiang. Ji was so useless. This wasn't using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. It was clearly using the ninth heaven Xian thunder to kill an ant. Your Abba. Your performance is enough to make you a disgrace among transmigrated women. You can't even compare to a Mary Sue. Commit suicide to atone for your sins. Jiang. Ji often saw the words Mary Sue in the live stream, but she thought that it was the name of a famous person. Now it seemed that she had misunderstood. She had a good habit of getting to the bottom of things. Ji humbly asked for advice. How was she inferior to a Mary Sue? The old general didn't want to bicker with her. Not long after, the system notified her that Jiang Ji had a delivery. She immediately opened the honeycomb delivery cabinet and found a few books lying inside. There were male and female covers. They were all comic book characters with all-like faces, big eyes, European-style double eyelids, and unibrow. The evil emperor wants to hug. Domineering. Ninth miss? Jiang. Ji read the names of the books and began reading from the first one. The salted fish in the live stream also knew Jiang. Ji and the old general she mentioned could contact each other, and even buy and mail things to each other. However, in recent years, the things they bought were mostly snacks. Some of the snacks were familiar to them, while others were completely unknown brands. That big shot was often online, but he was peeping. Many salted fish guessed that the big shot was Jiang, Ji's admirer. There was no lack of salted fish with strange ideas. They even edited a video of the love and hate entanglement between the three of them. There were tens of millions of views and millions of bullet screen comments. Only the heavens knew how salted fish managed to turn the three of them into a love triangle with a strange plot when the old chief didn't even post a few bullet screen comments or show his face. The salted fish thought that they were experienced, but they still underestimated Jiang, Ji's dirty tricks. They were actually in a place called Harem Drama Streaming Room, accompanying the streamer, chasing the throne dragon proudly heavens. They were watching a romance novel written by the demonic and arrogant male protagonist vs the arrogant and domineering female protagonist vs the coquettish and flirtatious female protagonist whenever she met the male protagonist. And it was even a physical novel, Tudo Feitio. Host: We've known each other for more than 10 years. Why do we have to hurt each other? Kneeling for you, Apao. Did you guys notice that these books are not new and unopened? Judging from the traces, someone must have read them. So here's the question. Was the last person who read these books the old leader that the streamer mentioned? It was said that the old chief and Jiang Zemin had a close relationship. Ji Zeng was a big shot of the same level. Just the thought of the big boss not reading classified documents, but reading Mary Sue novels was fascinating. Smash me with monthly tickets. Am I the only one who feels sorry for my friend? Mandarin was spoken in all dimensions, and Chinese was popular. The Mary Sue novels that the old general mailed to the host were also written in Chinese. What could be more hurtful than this? This was no longer the entire world speaking Mandarin, but all dimensions being ruled by Mandarin. The salted fishes muttered among themselves. Some curious salted fishes searched for the book's name, and actually found it. However, the book only had a name and a copy. The author did not upload any content. Taking a closer look at the book's creation date, it was probably Jiang. Ji Zeng read the book for a few minutes. Salted Fish immediately understood. He was impressed by the author's ability. If this wave of popularity was good, the book might become a god. Some readers in the book review section ridiculed that the search volume and popularity was something that even the male genre's platinum hero could not compare to. Jiang. Ji Zeng had a little habit of reading books. Before reading a book, she would first look at the book's title and copy. The book's title and copy were in standard red text format. She thought that she would not read such a lame novel. But in the end, it was delicious. She read for the entire morning, lying on her left side, lying on her right side, lying on her back, and crossing her legs. She did not want to get up at all. The salted fishes also accompanied her to read Mary Sue novels for the entire morning. At first, they complained that they did not want to read such silly and sweet Mary Sue novels, but as they read, they became engrossed. Jiang. Ji flipped faster, and the salted fishes made a lot of noise. You ban. Are you stupid? There's a recording in the livestream room. If you can't watch it in time, can you rewind it frame by frame? The salted fishes. How infuriating. They were actually mocked by the other salted fishes. Wei Xi found Jiang. Ji did not see her for the entire day. When she came to look for her, she found that her lord had unknowingly moved from the room to the outside. The floor was wiped exceptionally clean by her clothes. Wei Xi had never seen such a strange book. Ji was engrossed in reading, so he did not disturb her. Instead, he went forward to take a closer look at the cover. There were strange words with missing arms and legs, and Wei Xi naturally could not appreciate the beauty of artistic words. Zixiao, you're interested in this too? Jiang. Ji put down the book and happened to meet Wei Xi's eyes. No matter how engrossed she would not let down her guard against the outside world. She knew before Wei Xi even got close and wanted to see his reaction. Wei Xi said, "May I know what this is for?" Jiang. Ji threw it to him. A novel. It's quite interesting. Although the content is a little weird, the plot is quite well understood. Wei Ci subconsciously took it and took a look. He found that the quality of the paper of this book was better than the best bamboo paper. The thickness and size were the same. The tiny words on it were neat and beautiful. Every stroke seemed to have been copied. Wei Ci rubbed the words with his fingers and found that the surface of the paper was smooth. His fingertips could not feel the uneven marks of the writing, and the ink was not scattered. This was not something that could be achieved by a human. Wei Ci raised his head and looked straight at his lord. His dark eyes were filled with curiosity and surprise. Could this be the woodworking workshop's latest printing technique? When he asked this, Wei Ci's voice was faintly trembling. It was not from shock but from excitement. What about Jiang? Ji's words poured a bucket of cold water on him. No, the woodworking workshop wants to develop this kind of technology, but it is still far from it. Maybe it can be achieved in this lifetime. Ji pointed to the content of the book and said, I thought you were curious about the content of this book, so I let you read it. I didn't expect you to be concerned about the printing. Wei Ci then looked at the content carefully. He could not understand where the words came from for a long time. In terms of appearance, it was very similar to the words that he was familiar with. But when he read it carefully, the great scholar instantly became illiterate. Of course, words in this era were written vertically from top to bottom, and from right to left. But this book was written horizontally from top to bottom, and from right to left. Jiang. Ji took the book from his hand. The corners of her lips curled up with some evil intentions. Chapter 1769. There were many extremely embarrassing descriptions in this book. She only hoped that Wei Ci would not be too frightened. Just as she recited a paragraph, Wei Ci frowned in confusion. What is the Dark Shang Emperor? Ginger? Ji glanced at it and said, Male lead's name. Wei Ci said, Since ancient times, a single character is the most precious. Moreover, who would give their child the character Shang? Did he think the child didn't die early enough? It's probably a random combination by a naming software. After all, as you know, many novelists hate to give people names. It's too difficult to give people names. Ge could not help but grumble. Permutation and combination means to randomly pick 3 words to form a name. Wei Ci took a deep look at his lord, and did not make a sound. His lord also had a hard time in naming. Ginger? Ge read in a rhythmic manner, and Wei Ci listened attentively, only interrupting from time to ask questions. Be a ginger? Wei Ci revealed an indescribably conflicted expression after Ge finished reciting the palace drama that spanned 10 chapters and 30,000 words. What happened? Wei Ci exhaled and said awkwardly, It's tedious and cumbersome. I can describe it in a few hundred words. Why waste precious space? Ginger, Ji Yunshu said. Don't you find the psychological analysis of these characters quite interesting? Wei Ci said with a pained heart. Even if it's just a tiny character, no matter how densely packed it is, it would still take a lot of ink and waste paper. Ginger? Ji. She couldn't help but say to Wei Ci, This entire book only costs a dozen or so copper coins. If more copies are printed, the cost will be less than 10 copper coins. Wei Ci widened his eyes in shock. How many words does this book have? Ginger? Ji Yunshu flipped through it and gave a rough figure. Around 200,000. 200,000 words, less than 10 copper coins. Wei Ci said with difficulty. There are tens of thousands of books in Golden Scale Pavilion, but there are only about 5 million words in total. In other words, 400 coins was enough to buy a book collection the size of the Golden Scale Pavilion's library? What did that mean? Even the poorest family could build a Golden Scale Pavilion after a year of hard work. Ginger? Ji poured a bucket of cold water on him and said, I told you, I might not be able to reach that level in my lifetime. Wei Ci was stunned for a moment, thinking about the situation in his past life. In his previous life, the book industry had flourished because of the improvements in printing and papermaking techniques. It had indeed reached a height that Wei Ci dared not imagine in the past, but it was impossible to reach the scale that his lord had mentioned. Ginger. However, I'll definitely succeed within 100 years. 100 years? Wei Si sucked in a breath of cold air. Even if it was 100 years, it was already shocking enough. Going back 100 years, studying was still the privilege of the minority, and it hadn't changed much in the present day. The landowning households were monopolizing it even more. If it weren't for the sudden appearance of his lord, who resisted the pressure from the aristocrats to nurture a group of ordinary students in the Golden Scale Academy, who knew how long this situation would have lasted. If it were to be traced back to 100 years ago, every family would be able to obtain a copy of the Golden Scale Pavilion's book collection. Just thinking about that scene made Wei Si's fingers tremble with excitement. Ginger, Ji said, it's not a good thing for some things to develop too quickly. Only when the time is right will there be fertile ground for development. For example, in the popular investiture of the gods some time ago, King Zhou of Shang was criticized like a dog. Oh, it should be King Zhou. At that time, his thoughts and actions were quite advanced, and the latecomers couldn't say that he was wrong. However, he didn't conform to the times and became a failure in the end. Wei Si tried hard to calm himself down and looked at Jiang. The Mary Sue novel in Ji's hands was a little more passionate. Zixiao, did you see that? What? Jiang? Ji said, the future I want to create. The two of them were showing off their affection. The old chief saw that he used it to mock Jiang. Ji was so angry that her teeth hurt when she used her things to flirt with a man. Your Abba. I want you to see what the transmigrator uses the rubber for, and then reflect on your own situation. But you're flirting with a man? Jiang, Ji said quietly. Is the damn rubber tree more important than my Zixiao? Single dogs were only suitable for celebrating Singles' Day. They could sweep the shopping cart and chop off their hands and feet while eating other people's affection. System notification. Your friend, your Abba, has blacklisted you. Jiang. Ji was speechless. She was so embarrassed that she flew into a rage. At least mail the rubber tree to her first. Zixiao, I seem to have accidentally offended someone. Wei Si expressed that it must be the other party, who didn't know what was good for them and didn't understand reason. The Lord just needed to understand people with emotion and reason. Jiang. Ji laughed secretly. Fortunately, the old chief had blacklisted her, or else she would be depressed. The old chief had always been very protective of Wei Si, because Wei Si was a young man. In the eyes of the old chief, who was 200 to 300 years old, in the eyes of the old chief, he was a little kid who hadn't even grown his hair. If she knew that Wei Si said that, she would fly into a rage. Jiang. Ji said, you're right. After all, she's getting on in years. It's normal for her to be a little grumpy. Wei Si's smile deepened when he heard the words the geraniums are getting on in years. This revealed a piece of information. The other party was a woman, and not a threat. Jiang. Ji had read a lot of books and had read countless travel notes. She knew that there were rubber trees in another distant place in this world, and there were similar records in one of the travel notes. However, if she sent someone to search according to the contents of the travel notes, it would take at least 2 to 3 years, and at most 5 to 6 years. If she was unlucky, the person she sent would die on the way, and she would have to send another group of people to take over, which would take even longer. If she asked the old chief to mail some, she didn't know how much manpower, material, and financial resources could be saved. The old chief had just lifted the ban on her. Ji went over to flatter him, throwing all the flattering words at him. As the saying goes, a good girl is afraid of a pestering man. Jiang. In the end, Ji thawed the ice cube that was the old chief. Everyone last night, an immortal entered my dream to give me pointers. Early in the morning, Jiang. Ji gathered everyone with a solemn expression. The beginning of the meeting was filled with fantastical content. Everyone knew that their lord was magical. After all, during the battle at Zhangjiang Pass, Nieliang's 10,000 arrows could not hurt their lord at all. That was a fact witnessed by tens of thousands of people. Their lord also said that when she was young, she dreamed that the sun was setting in the west. At sunset, an immortal with white hair and beard appeared and taught her a set of bamboo slips. He asked her to learn from the bamboo slips to make up for the lack of yang qi when a woman was self-created. When she practiced to perfection, She could even release her inner chi to protect herself. From all the signs, their lord was the disciple of a certain immortal. Now their lord said that an immortal entered her dream to give her pointers, so it was most likely true. Feng Jin frowned and asked, "What did the immortal say?" Jiang Ji felt that Huayu was getting better and better, so she gave him a small credit. "A few days ago, I was troubled by something. The immortal said that she sensed something and specially helped me by landing the item somewhere in the west of the city. In case the bestowed item was damaged by the people and angered the heavens, we need to send people to search for it as soon as possible." Jiang Ji nodded and said, "I think so too." In fact, her inner thoughts were, Chapter 1770. Jiang Pingji, as an adult, expressed, multiple choice questions were for kids. Of course, an adult would want all of them. However, the old general who harbored evil intentions poured a bucket of cold water on her head. She was so excited that her heart turned cold. Rubber trees were not suitable to be planted in Dongqing, let alone in Wanzhou. They would die if they were transplanted there. That's not right. Why are they not suitable? Jiang Pingji dug out the relevant plot of the Mary Sue novel in disbelief and went through it from beginning to end. There was nothing wrong with it. There were too many species in the interstellar era. Jiang Pingji was not a plant expert, so she naturally did not know the living habits of rubber trees. "Yuaba, it's too cold over there. The seeds I gave you can't germinate. The 2 specimen trees can't be transplanted either." Jiang Pingji was confused. What did the old chief mean? He had already taken off his pants and washed them. How could he tell her that she was having her period today? How is it not suitable? "I read the book you gave me as a reference. The setting of the book was in the dead of winter. Didn't the rubber trees come back to life?" Jiang Pingji had thought that rubber trees could be transplanted successfully in Dongqing after reading the book. But now he was telling her that it was not possible. Thinking about it, Jiang Pingji asked tentatively, "Is it not resistant to the cold?" "Yuaba, it's not resistant to the cold. It likes high temperatures and high humidity. I checked and it said that it will be frozen below 5 degrees Celsius. The planting area also has certain requirements for annual precipitation. The soil needs to be deep, fertile and moist acidic loam. Right, because the branches are weak and the roots are shallow. They are not able to withstand the wind. Cold weather will affect rubber production and reduce production." Jiang Pingji. Why didn't he say so earlier? The old chief was just watching Jiang Pingji. Otherwise, he would not have misled her by reading the Mary Sue novel. Why would he say it out loud? If he had not misled her, Jiang Pingji would have naturally looked through the records of rubber trees in the travel notes and paid attention to the environment they grew in. As soon as the old chief arrived, he did something outrageous. He directly substituted Jiang Pingji into the black ditch. Jiang Pingji could not help but scratch her head. In that case, the most suitable place to plant rubber trees should be the southern part of Nansheng and the original fiefdoms of the 4 factions of Nanman. I need to rearrange the manpower there. However, since he had gotten the seeds, he had to give it a try. You can first place the seeds in a greenhouse and simulate the hot and humid environment in the south to cultivate the seedlings. After a few months, you can transplant them to Nansheng. Time was precious and should not be wasted. Jiang Pingji did not want to be taken advantage of by the old chief. She immediately asked the old chief to send her a few barrels of latex. "Your Abba, what do you want latex for?" She bought a plane ticket worth a few thousand RMB and flew to the destination to dig up 2 rubber trees. He also sold her hundreds of caddies of seeds. According to the shop owner, the germination rate of these seeds was very high and the quality was trustworthy. After doing all that, he asked her to mail a few barrels of rubber latex. "TSK, Jiang Xiaojiu, have you paid me for my hard work?" "No, not a single cent." "Humph, what a fickle woman." Jiang Pingji said, "Dongqing can't plant the rubber trees you sent here on a large scale. The temperature here is below 0 in winter. Won't the rubber trees freeze to death? Without a tree, latex can't be produced. Without latex, how can we study the 108 uses of latex?" Jiang Pingji was righteous as a gangster. If the old chief helped her now, Wouldn't he be helping himself in the future? This was what the old chief should do. Jiang Pingji's conscience was not condemned at all. She ordered him around with great vigor. After a while, Jiang Pingji did not receive an answer from the old chief. Instead, she received a golden notification from the system. Your friend, your Abba, has blacklisted you. Jiang Pingji. What had the old chief experienced in the years since he retired? To be honest, her temper was getting worse. She blacklisted people for no reason. In just a few days, she had blacklisted her twice. Was she really going through menopause? Although she was blacklisted, Jiang Pingji was not worried that she would be blacklisted forever. She sent someone to count the rubber seeds one by one and put them in the warehouse. Although she did not know much about rubber tree seeds, based on her experience as a genetic warrior, she concluded that the seeds were poisonous. The toxicity should not be strong, but it could be fatal. If it was accidentally ingested, nausea and vomiting would be fine, but it would be terrible if someone died. After doing all that, Jiang Pingji threw the misleading Mary Sue novel aside and ignored it. Wei Xi was very interested and asked her for the book. What's so interesting about this book? Jiang Pingji's attitude was typical of eating with one's bowl and cursing after putting it down. She had finished reading the novel and enjoyed herself. Now she only felt disgusted. She was not ashamed, but proud of her double standards. Wei Xi said, "There are many things worth learning and studying." What's there to learn? It's the same as when men and women practice together. After a moment of comfort, it becomes boring. Wei Xi's ears turned red as he listened. His resentful eyes fell on Jiang Pingji. He asked, "Is it the same, my lord? Will it be boring too?" Jiang Pingji's strong desire to live made up for it, so as not to hurt the little man's self-esteem. Wei Xi did not say anything else. He left with the books. The evil emperor wants to hug the domineering ninth mistress. His back was full of accusations. Who was he accusing? He was accusing Jiang Pingji, the big pig trotter, who fell out with him before he even put on his pants. Haha, boring. Then he should obediently cultivate his body and mind. Jiang Pingji reached out to Wei Xi's back, but she could not stop him. When she looked up, the screen was densely packed with bullet screens that mocked Jiang Pingji for being single because of her ability. A few people were clamoring to be the one to take over. Piao Kasei. I feel sorry for Zixiao. This kind of flirtatious words hurt a man's self-esteem. Yi Manqing Mao. The streamer is indeed a model straight woman who is single because of her ability. Piaoling Yushang. I'm an honest man. I want to take over Zixiao. Do I queue up to receive it or go through the procedure? Dong Dong Xia Hua Kai. To the one above, go through the procedure and fight with the streamer. If you win, you can be the one to take over. Jiang Pingji was angry. These salted fish were getting bolder and bolder. They even dared to covet her Zixiao. Although the salted fish said flirtatious words, it did not mean that they did not do anything serious. Chapter 1771. I'm the hottie. Is that enough? Jiang Ji yawned and used a fan to dry the ink on the page she had just copied. Of course it's enough. I've even written down how to collect latex when rubber trees produce latex. Isn't that detailed enough? The salted fish felt that it was not enough. They should add a more detailed latex processing method, which could save them a lot of detours. Jiang Ji chose to refuse. Some things could be done simply by spending time, such as finding rubber trees and seeds, summarizing how to cultivate, and how to prevent diseases from the local natives. These things could be done by spending time, but Jiang Ji didn't mind using a cheat to shorten the process. Once it came to the research field, she didn't want to continue using a cheat. Using a cheat meant depriving them of the process of research and exploration. At the same time, it also erased the infinite possibilities of the future. She was willing to guide them, even if they took a detour, because it was a process of accumulating experience. Without this process and the spirit of research, the technology tree could only stagnate or even go backward. Every year, she supported the people in the woodworking workshop with a high salary. She didn't want to raise a bunch of useless people who could only wait for ready-made products. Let them figure out how to use latex to make the finished product I want. I can only give them some suggestions at most. Although the old commander was blackmailing Jiang, Ji was released after being locked in the small dark room for a few hours. He also sent her several buckets of fresh latex. The old commander was a hypocrite. His words were arrogant and his actions were tough, but his body was very honest. Jiang, Ji couldn't help but say something flirtatious, but the old commander scolded her angrily. I'm magnanimous. I won't fight with a menopausal woman. Jiang, Ji muttered in her heart, and sent someone to send the latex and the booklet to the woodworking workshop. Natural rubber was an elastic solid made by solidifying and drying latex from rubber trees. It seemed ordinary, but it had a wide range of uses. Even for Jiang, in Ji's time, rubber had also subtly invaded every aspect of people's lives. In the salted fish dimension, it was more widely used in industry, defense, transportation, medicine, and daily life. Ji thought it would cause a commotion in the woodworking workshop if she brought it. But there was not even a ripple. She waited for a few days, but there was no progress report. She couldn't help but go there herself. There were 3 bosses in the woodworking workshop, known as the Iron Triangle. They were Zhang Ping, Xiao Guang, and Bai Yuexia. Ginger? When Ji came over, she only saw 2 people. Yuexia isn't here today? The 2 of them greeted each other. Zhang Ping smiled a little worriedly. My body is heavy and I don't have much energy. I usually only come at noon. Ginger. Ji Yinshu was stunned. My body is heavier? Bai Yuexia was still single. How could she be overweight? Zhang Ping said shamefully. This subject did not handle this matter well. As soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Yu's expression changed. Ji Yi scanned Zhang Ping and found something strange. Zhang Ping, who had always believed in the plum wife crane, had a faint smell of cosmetics around him. His clothes were obviously different from before. Ginger? Ji Yinshu blurted out. Does General Bai know? The old lady was leading the troops to defend Zhanjiang Pass against foreign enemies, but Zhang Ping, this unmarried man, had taken her daughter from behind and even made her pregnant out of wedlock. According to Jiang, based on Ji Ye's understanding of General Bai, once he returned, the first thing he would do was to smash Zhang Ping's head. In this era, those who had the guts to get pregnant out of wedlock were stupid women and scumbags. But Zhang Ping didn't look like such a scumbag, and Bai Yuexia wasn't stupid either. Zhang Ping said, I wrote a letter a few months ago, but I haven't received a reply yet. Zhang Ping didn't dare to get married until his future father-in-law returned. Time flew, and Bai Yuexia's belly grew like a balloon. Since he knew that Bai Yuexia was pregnant, he couldn't sleep well, eat well, and his hair was about to go bald. Bai Yuexia's character was different from ordinary women. She didn't care about her pregnancy out of wedlock, but Zhang Ping was worried that the rumors would slander her. Zhang Ping was still a man. If outsiders dared to gossip and secretly speculate which man Bai Yuexia had an affair with and was pregnant with a child, he would stand up and say that the child was his and openly admit it. If it were those scumbags who cherished their reputation, they would have already pushed the blame to others. As the due date approached, Zhang Ping's condition worsened. My lord, why don't you arrange the marriage on behalf of old General Bai before the delivery, so that the child can have a proper status? If she got pregnant before marriage, she would be an illegitimate child. Zhang Ping was worried that someone would use this to slander him when he grew up. There was nothing he could do if his father-in-law couldn't make it back in time. If there was a lord and a princess presiding over the wedding, it would be more legitimate in name, and the preparations would be faster. Ginger? Ji said, speaking of titles, I remember the son of the two family. Wisdom? It could be considered as a premarital pregnancy. After she became pregnant, she never promised Fu Wang. In the end, Fu Wang was forced to be thick-skinned and enter the wisdom realm. After so many years, there were some unpleasant words in the outside world, but no one dared to spread them to the ears of this couple, because they were not people to be trifled with. The pair of twins had been studying in the Golden Scale Academy for a few years now. Relying on their parents, they were the two tyrants of the academy. From the looks of it, Bai Yuexia's matter wasn't a big deal. Zhang Ping was stunned, as if he hadn't thought of this. Let's wait for General Bai to come back and arrange the marriage. If your future father-in-law wants to kill you, I'll stop him for you. Zhang Ping was a scholar, and his physique was not as good as an old general who had experienced hundreds of battles. If his father-in-law really got angry, Zhang Ping, an old unmarried man, would be beaten to death. It doesn't matter when you get married. As long as you don't change your mind, everything can be discussed. Otherwise, even I can't protect you. Ginger? Like many superiors, Ji didn't like office romance. It was fine if it was a husband and wife relationship. If it went well in the office, it would be a good story. But if it broke down, it would be a tragedy. If the two of them broke down, they were colleagues in the same organization. How would they get along when they met in the future? What if it delayed their work? If Zhang Ping really had the guts to let someone down, Ginger? Ji could only turn a blind eye and let Bai Ning and his daughter fight against Zhang Ping. What else could she do? A relationship that broke down couldn't be solved by the superiors. Either one of them resigned and jumped ship, or the other was transferred to another place and would never see each other again. Zhang Ping and Bai Yuexia were both poor students. If they couldn't be transferred to other departments, one of them would be hurt. Ginger? Ji didn't come here to gossip about her subordinate's love life. She changed the topic. How's the research on the latex that was sent a while ago? Zhang Ping quickly got into work mode and looked puzzled. There's some progress, but I'm confused. What does the Lord want this thing for? Ginger? Ji choked for a moment and hesitated. Should she do BYT for birth control or tires? After this thing solidifies, it will be very useful. Zhang Ping said respectfully. I'd like to hear the details. For example, Ginger? Ji still didn't say BYT openly. She thought for a while and came up with a reliable excuse. This thing can be used to make shoe soles. The straw shoes worn by the soldiers are too worn out, and wooden clogs are not convenient to walk in a hurry. This thing is different. The Lord is right. This thing is strong and elastic. If it is made into shoe soles, the soldiers will indeed suffer a lot less. Zhang Ping was inspired and made inferences. Elastic. Oh right, maybe it can also be used on carriages to reduce the bumps when driving. Chapter 1772. Yijie Shusheng. Ha ha ha. Even the streamer has times when she is neglected. Look at the grievance in her eyes. Lousy most handsome in the world. I think Zhang Ping is digging his own grave. Doesn't he know that pleasing the streamer is more important than pleasing his father-in-law? He can ignore anyone but Jiang? Gee, Zhang Ping is destined to be alone for life. Shanyumuxi Muji. What's the matter? No matter how charming the streamer is, it's impossible for all the men in the world to revolve around her. Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang are technical researchers. What's so strange about them being so engrossed in their research and forgetting everything else? If the streamer makes things difficult for Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang because of this, then she's not the streamer I know. Can't you guys have a limit when it comes to jokes? It's just a job. Zhang Ping doesn't have to hang on to Jiang. Ji is a crooked tree. At most, they'll just break up. Poor priest sees your chrysanthemum as poisonous. That's a big deal. Bai Yuexia's feelings for the streamer are above friendship, but they are not yet in love. Coupled with the thick filter of a fangirl, the streamer's attitude directly affects whether Yuexia is willing to follow Zhang Ping. Some of the people who didn't know what was going on. Zion Caton. I just heard that Beauty CI seems to be quite wary of Yuexia and treats her as a love rival. Feng Jinsong. Previously, someone recommended that this streaming room has passion, gay love and Ji's feelings. I didn't believe it, but now I believe it. The salted fishes were unscrupulously communicating with each other. Ji's gossip. The more they talked, the more surprised they were. Jiang. Ji listened to the conversation between Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang patiently. She didn't show it on her face, but she was very satisfied. When the two of them came back to their senses, they realized that they had ignored their master for a long time. Their expressions were a little unnatural. Jiang. Ji stopped them from apologizing and said gently, "It's your duty to be engrossed in research and work. What's wrong with that? When it came to these Mo family's treasures, Jiang Ji had always been very tolerant and considerate of them. Even during the 2 years when the economy was at its worst, she didn't embezzle the woodworking workshop's funds. Of course, she wouldn't get angry because of a momentary rudeness. "Tell me about your plans." Zhang Ping bowed and said, "Yes, Your Highness, please follow me and observe." Jiang Ji and Shu stayed in the woodworking workshop for the whole afternoon, and only left reluctantly when the golden crow descended. Before leaving, Zhang Ping asked her about something. How much of this latex can be harvested in a year? According to their current research, the solidified and dried latex had good properties. Not only could it be made into shoes for soldiers, but it could also be used in other places. If the production could keep up, the military's expenses could be reduced by a lot. Although the straw sandals were not expensive, the army would wear out a pair in 1 or 2 days. When such a large number of straw sandals accumulated, it would still be a considerable expenditure. If the soles could be replaced with natural rubber soles that could withstand wear and tear, not only would the soles of the soldiers suffer less, but they would also be replaced less frequently. From a macro point of view, replacing straw sandals with rubber shoes could save a lot of money on military supplies. Moreover, this kind of shoes could be worn not only by soldiers, but also by ordinary people. The commoners were not as worn out as the soldiers. A pair of shoes could be worn for 2 to 3 years. Ginger, Ji said regretfully. The trees that produce latex can only survive in the south of Nanxing. They can't withstand the cold. I have already sent people to cultivate the seedlings. When the time comes, we will find a suitable place to cultivate them. If we want to mass produce them, it's not possible in the next few years. It should be much better in the future. After hearing this, Zhang Ping looked disappointed. In recent years, the war had been fierce. As his lord became more and more powerful, the other feudal vassals were gradually showing signs of decline. From Zhang Ping's point of view, within 10 years, his lord would be able to rule the world. When that time came, the rubber shoes would have a scale, but it would not be of much use to the soldiers. Ginger, Ji knew what he was thinking. She smiled and said, "This thing is not only for the soldiers, but also for the people of the world. If it is beneficial to the people, so what if it's a little later? I heard from your discussion that this thing can be used in many other places. It shouldn't be limited to making shoes. Tinkering with tires, tinkering with BYT, and contributing to his livelihood were all acceptable." Ginger, Zhang Ping and Ji naturally did not know what was going on in Ji's mind. With their lord's guarantee, they were full of confidence. They continued to discuss, and unanimously agreed, that this thing could also be used to modify horses and carriages. For example, they could try to stick the rubber on the wheels, or wrap the wheels, to reduce the contact between the wooden wheels and the gravel on the ground. This was also a good idea. At this time, the wheels and axles were all made of wood. Even though they were made of high quality, high strength and crisscross fibers of elm or similar wood, it could not change the fact that they were wood and not metal. The road conditions were not good, and there was a lot of wear and tear. If a part of the structure could be replaced with rubber, it might have a miraculous effect. Of course, these were all ideas. They had not been put into practice, so the effect was unknown. If the effect was good, it could be further improved. If the effect was not good, they would have to find other ideas. Ginger, Ji wanted to remind them that they could try inflatable tires, but she swallowed the words when they reached her mouth. Inflatable tires were also not something that could be achieved with current technology. Even if they could be made, the road conditions did not support it. The time was not ripe. However, she thought of the bicycle that she saw in the Interstellar Museum a long time ago. This thing could be tried. Shiheng, get me a pen and paper. I have something for you to do. The people in the carpentry workshop did not use a brush. Instead, they used Ginger. Ji's improved ink strip looked like the prototype of a pencil. It was very convenient to draw. With 2 whooshes, she drew a bicycle and a rickshaw pulled by a man. Ginger, Ji's drawing skills were actually not bad. Everything was drawn in detail. The tires were naturally not inflatable. They were all solid rubber. Zhang Ping, and the others would adjust how to save effort. This thing is. Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang came over and looked at the paper in a daze. The rickshaw was a bit like the cart of today, but the style was very different. They could still understand. The bicycle. In their eyes, it looked really strange, not to mention making it. I am slow-witted. Please enlighten me, my lord. Ginger. Ji did not make things difficult for them. She told them her idea. The people of today would definitely not accept a bicycle. She just wanted to make one and take Zi Xiao for a ride. The rickshaw was used to enrich the types of carriages and horses. She said, I first came to the carpentry workshop on a public carriage. It is cheap, but the smell is too strong. Even with the simple carriage plate, the horses but was facing the passengers, and the smell was strong. It was really not a good experience. Chapter 1773. Who had an easy life in this world? Having a proper and stable job, even if it was manual labor, was also a form of hope for the people. Jiang, Ji said, not everyone can afford a carriage. I think no one will object to it, if it's a convenient way to travel. Xiangyang City was so big, and the people had a good standard of living. The carriage driver didn't have to worry about business. Zhang Ping relaxed his brows and said, my lord's thoughts are for the people. This is a great deed. I will do my best to make this thing. Jiang, Ji said, we have to make a bicycle too. She wanted to take Xiaoyu for a ride. Speaking of which, she was one of the higher-ups of the Federation's military after all. She had a few modified sports cars in her garage, and she even had a display stand for the mecha hub of the combat mecha. In the end, she had to rely on a bicycle to flirt with a man and go for a ride. Zhang Ping asked curiously, my lord calls it a bicycle. It should be a car, but I don't know how to use it. Jiang? Ji said, sit on the seat with your legs apart and step on the pedals. Zhang Ping. He didn't know if he should question whether he would be unable to stand, or that this position was too immoral. When he thought about how riding this thing was equivalent to holding something between his legs in broad daylight, it was really unsightly. Jiang. Ji saw that he didn't speak and asked, is there anything wrong? Zhang Ping smiled awkwardly but politely. There's nothing wrong. Then it's settled. I'll wait for your good news. Jiang. Ji was now a person with a big family business. If there was anything, she could just instruct her subordinates to do it. She only needed to steer the ship. Oh yes, since Yuexia is pregnant and her body isn't as good as before, don't let her touch latex in case it harms the fetus. Ji changed the topic and said, let her look at the blueprint of the bicycle. I remember that she's most interested in this kind of thing. Zhang Ping was about to thank her. He opened his mouth, but Jiang? Ji did this to him. He thought that his lord pitied the pregnant woman and wanted to give Yuexia paid maternity leave. In the end, she let her work on a new project while she was pregnant? That was a pregnant woman. Pregnant women were also people. As long as the intensity of labor was not excessive, Jiang? Ji would not even let pregnant women off. What could Zhang Ping say? Of course, he revealed a stiff smile and accepted the order on behalf of Bai Yuexia. She thought that Bai Yuexia didn't have the energy to do it, but when Zhang Ping handed the blueprint to her, she almost jumped up from the mat with her big belly. Zhang Ping hurriedly supported her, looking frightened. Take it easy. Don't stretch your stomach. Bai Yuexia gently slapped his right hand away. The stomach is on my body. I didn't say anything, but your reaction is even bigger than mine. Zhang Ping smiled bitterly. I just can't bear to see you too tired. Bai Yuexia said. How can there be any reason to neglect a task entrusted to me by the Lord? I'm in good health, and the one in my stomach doesn't dare to disturb me. Ginger. Ji Yinshu's drawing was very detailed. At the end, there was even a diagram of each part. Bai Yuexia took a closer look, and the more she looked, the more amazed she became. His lord was really a Mahist genius who had been held back by fighting for the world. At the same time, some people sighed with emotion. Ji was a designer who was held back by seize the throne. My lord, the samples have been delivered. They are waiting inside. Ginger. After leaving the woodworking workshop, he bumped into Wei Ci on his way back. She asked. What kind of clothes? Wei Si replied. Didn't the Lord hand over the finished drawings to the embroiderer to cut paper for the graduation clothes? The samples have been made in a hurry. Ginger. Ji slapped her head. She had almost forgotten about this matter. Let's go and see what it looks like. Ginger. Ji's drawings have been modified by Wei Si. Her drawing skills were more suitable for drawing mechanical drawings. And Wei Si was good at other things. She was looking forward to seeing what the final product would look like. The elderly embroiderer and tailor were given to Ginger. Ji bowed respectfully before bringing the neatly folded samples over. Ginger, Ji said. Why don't you let someone wear it to see how it looks? What would it look like if it was folded? The tailor said. This old servant doesn't dare to. How can this old servant try on the clothes of the nobles? Usually, the clothes that they made were directly worn by the nobles. They would never let the nobles wear them after they had tried them on. The clothes had to be new, not second-hand. Ginger, Ji said. Fine, I'll find 2 people to try. The clothes have to be worn to know what's wrong with them. The embroidery of the clothes was done by the embroiderer. It was neat and meticulous. And the overall effect of the clothes was the same as Ginger? Ji had imagined. No. She let the person who tried it on turn around, only to find that the iron-eating beast emblem on the back of the clothes had been changed. Ginger, Ji had drawn a black and white chibi version of the panda head. It looked very cute, but it did not match the overall style of the clothes. After Wei Si's modifications, the original cute chibi style turned into a noble, cool, and indifferent style. The panda head was drawn with black silk threads. At first glance, it looked like an unfamiliar word, but upon closer inspection, one could see that it was the head of the iron-eating beast. The head was surrounded by a circle, and there were a total of 8 meandering lines in all directions, like willow leaves and burning tongues of fire. Ginger, Ji smiled and said, Not bad. Wei Si had previously said that he wanted to make a small change to the emblem. Ji was busy and did not ask in detail how to make the change, and let him do it. Experts could tell once they made a move, and they were much more professional than her. Wei Si lowered his head and smiled bitterly. Could he say that this emblem was the royal emblem of the Jiang royal family in the previous life? Back then, His Majesty also wanted to use the iron-eating beast as the emblem, but the drawing was not very good. A few important ministers made several changes before the current version was achieved. This emblem was in the center of the back. It was not big, and the size was only a circle formed by the thumb and index finger. It was not very eye-catching, but it could not be ignored. I am very satisfied with the sample, and the finished clothes will be made according to this. Jiang Ji smiled and said to everyone, The senior students of the Golden Scale Academy have also resumed school. Follow my orders and go to the academy to make the clothes for the students. They must be well-fitting, so that they will look energetic when wearing them. There were only slightly more than 200 students graduating in the first batch, so there was still time to make the clothes. This was the first batch, so there was no experience. If it was the next batch of students, the graduation clothes would have to be prepared a long time in advance. The clothes are ready. Has the Lord thought about what questions to test them? Jiang Ji said. Why do I have to set a question too? Wei Si said. After all, this is the first batch. If the Lord values them, the outside world will naturally value them more. That makes sense, then let me think. Jiang Ji rolled her eyes and smiled. Ji Yunshu rolled her eyes and said with a smile, What a coincidence, I have it. Ready-made? Sugarcane and rubber trees, aren't they ready-made? Jiang Ji, when Ji was in school, every examination paper was closely related to current affairs. This detail tells us that students should also develop the habit of being concerned about the affairs of the outside world. Chapter 1774. My lord, I think that sugar cane and rubber trees are not suitable for the exam. It's unfair. These 2 things have yet to be spread, except for the children of a few important ministers. The other students are all commoners. How would they know about these things? Wei Si voted against it. The information channels were not equal. It was obviously unfair to the students, who came from ordinary backgrounds, to use these two questions as the exam questions. Whether it was sugar cane or rubber trees, they belonged to unconventional topics that very few people knew about. Even Feng Jin, who was unprepared, might not be able to answer the exam questions, let alone a group of students. His lord's exam questions were not only beyond the syllabus, but they were also fatal. Jiang Pingji could not help but laugh. Although Zixiao's considerations are thorough, he's too cautious. I used this as the exam questions. Naturally, I won't let those kids have the possibility of cheating. The exam questions can briefly mention the functions of sugar cane and rubber trees, as well as their future applications. They can reveal key information, and the students can analyze and judge based on this information. I'm very curious. If I ask the students about the benefits of promoting these two things, can they dig deeper into the meaning and understand my intentions? If the exam was like that, Feng Yi and the others would lose their advantage, because Jiang Pingji had forcefully leveled the information. Jiang Pingji said, "The graduation exam is not difficult for these students. There won't be the phenomenon of failing the exam and repeating a year. But I don't need talents who only know how to read from the book." The exam system of the Golden Scale Academy was quite strict. Jiang Pingji had seen the students' past performance. Graduation was definitely not a problem. Wei Xi thought for a while. My lord is right, but I still have something to say. Say it. What can't you say directly between us? Wei Xi said hesitantly. It's a waste to give two questions at once. Why don't you give one and leave one? Leave one? Why leave it? My lord, have you forgotten? Although the Academy's graduation examination is important, it is only a minor examination within the Academy. The major examination for your selection of scholars is still to come. Wei Xi reminded her. She had asked two important questions at once. What would the imperial examination test be about? Jiang Pingji said with a smile. I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. I'll give one of the questions and leave the other one for later. The two joked and decided on a major question that the students would never forget. Many years later, there were still many students who dreamed that they were sitting in the examination hall for their graduation exams. That was not scary. What was scary was the last question. It was the nightmare of nightmares. According to the original plan, the graduation examination would be held at the end of the first month after the new year. But due to insufficient preparations, it could only be delayed by a month. The group of students did not feel relieved. Instead, they became even more anxious. As the time for the assessment approached, everyone felt as if they were about to be executed. The nervous atmosphere of the senior students also infected the students of the other years, and they looked at their seniors with sympathy. The students, who felt a sense of crisis, exploded with unprecedented enthusiasm for learning. Although it was still a long time before their assessment, they had to make ample preparations so that they wouldn't be flustered in the future. There were also students who applied to participate in the graduation assessment together with the senior students, but their results would not be included in the final ranking. Han Yu's eldest son, Han Run, was one of them. He wanted to see how far he was from the senior students, so that he could accumulate experience for the graduation exam in a few years. On this day, Han Yu was at home on a break. He was giving special attention to his eldest son, helping him find out what he missed out. His illegitimate son and daughter were studying hard at the desk not far away. The youngest son, Han Qi, was also sitting, shaking his head while memorizing the beginner's books. At this time, an uninvited guest came to the house. Han Run was hard at work when he caught a glimpse of a silhouette from the corner of his eye. Father, the housekeeper is here. Han Run thought the old housekeeper had something important to report, so he didn't dare to delay. Han Yu frowned and turned to ask, "What's the matter?" The old housekeeper looked embarrassed. "Master, there is a guest visiting." "Who is it? Why didn't you give me a visiting card?" It was rare for Han Yu to have a day off. He declined many invitations from his friends, and specially stayed at home to help with the children's homework. He didn't want to see an uninvited guest without a visiting card. The old housekeeper's eyes fell on Han Run, and the young Han Qi. He wanted to say something but stopped. Han Yu understood. The uninvited guest, who was related to the two sons, seemed to be the one from Shangyang County. Who was it? Of course it was Madame Tao, who had divorced Han Yu a few years ago. For the sake of the two sons, Han Yu didn't get angry. He asked calmly, "What is she doing here?" Madame Tao's maiden family was destroyed by the Lord. Madame Tao escaped as a married daughter. Later, her eldest son, Han Run, settled her in a private house in Shangyang County. Since the two of them divorced, Han Yu hadn't paid attention to Madame Tao's recent situation. He didn't understand the purpose of her visit. The old housekeeper said, "I heard that she seems to be pregnant. She specially came to see you two Langjuns." Han Yu was stunned for a moment before he realized that Madame Tao was going to remarry. Then I'll have to congratulate her. Han Yu's reaction was still calm when he heard that his ex-wife was going to remarry. If they divorced, they wouldn't be husband and wife anymore. They weren't very old, so it was normal for them to have a second love. Han Yu didn't have any opinion on his ex-wife remarrying. Han Run, who was beside him, bit his lower lip. His hand that was holding the brush trembled slightly. Han Yu could accept it without any grudge, but he couldn't. After several years of separation, the former husband and wife didn't have the sharp and tit-for-tat attitude they used to have. Madame Tao looked at Han Yu, who was sitting upright, and a trace of absent-mindedness flashed in her eyes. She had been depressed all these years, and looked like she had aged more than 10 years. Han Yu, on the other hand, did not show any signs of aging. His temperament had become more and more condensed, as if he was the essence that had been accumulated over the years. People could not help but sigh at the favoritism of God. If she had not been so stubborn in the past, perhaps she would still be the high and mighty Madame Han now. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in the world. Madame Tao would not change her choice even if she had another chance. Between her husband, her son and her family, she would always choose the latter. Of course, Madame Tao didn't come here today to renew her relationship with her ex-husband. She knew Han Yu's temperament. If he chose to give up, he wouldn't be reluctant to leave. He wouldn't look back. She wouldn't ask for trouble. The two of them calmly exchanged greetings. Madame Tao was concerned about the studies of her eldest son, Han Run, and the health of her youngest son. Han Yu answered all of them. Han Yu was a smart man, and Madame Tao was not good at hiding her intentions. Han Yu knew that Madame Tao was here for something. He pretended not to know. Seeing that time passed, Madame Tao was a little anxious before the topic got to the point. She had no choice but to state the purpose of this trip, but it was a little tactful. But, no matter how tactful she was, she couldn't change the purpose of probing the graduation exam. Han Yu frowned slightly, and pursed his lips without saying a word. His eldest son Han Run said, "Mother, the exam questions are confidential. I heard that the exam question bank was made by several great scholars in secret, and the exam questions were selected by Master Lanting. No one knows the content of the exam. How did father know?" Chapter 1775. Madame Tao said straightforwardly, "It's just a school exam in the academy. It's not a big deal. How can your father not know?" It all depended on whether the other party had the heart to know. Han Yu frowned. Han Run said, "My father's future is important. How can he participate in fraud? Most of these students are going to be officials. It's still unknown what their future achievements will be. If my father is tainted with the scandal of fraud, there will be hundreds of potential political enemies." Madame Tao felt sad when she saw her son was so supportive of his father. Her son crawled out of her womb, but he stuck to his father. She had doted on him for so many years in vain. Han Run asked her disappointedly, "Mother, did you come all the way here just to ask about this?" Madame Tao looked a bit unnatural. Han Run asked again, "Mother, it has nothing to do with the graduation exam of the Golden Scale Academy. Why do you care about this?" Madame Tao said, "I heard that my son is also going to join the exam. How can it be nothing to do with me?" The implication was that she came for her son Han Run. Han Run sighed secretly and said, "Mother, you should know that I am not young enough and my knowledge is not as good as the seniors in the senior grade. This exam is just to see how good I am. No matter how I do, the results are not counted. It's meaningless to leak the questions to my son. Han Run knew that his mother was lying. Madame Tao saw that there was no result. She had to skip the topic and briefly said that she was going to remarry in a few months. She thought that Han Yu would be ashamed or embarrassed, but he didn't even frown. He only said, "Congratulations." Han Run also said, "Congratulations, mother, on your second marriage." The young and chubby Han Chi blinked his eyes. The little chubby boy with red lips and white teeth also chuckled and imitated his brother's words. "Congratulations, mother, on your marriage." The little boy didn't know what had happened. When Han Yu and Madame Tao got divorced, the little guy was still ignorant. Now he didn't know that his words had stabbed his mother's bloody heart. Madame Tao was so ashamed that she covered her face and ran away. Han Run couldn't bear it and turned to look at his father. Han Yu thought for a while and said, "Check the family she remarried into. This question is most likely related to her future husband's family." Sure enough, they found something. The family that Mrs. Tao remarried into was also a gentry family. Her family status was not as high as Han Yu's, but it was still a good choice. Her remarried husband had a legitimate son left behind by his deceased wife. This legitimate son was also a student who was about to graduate. However, the other party was a transfer student at a later stage. Because he still had a sense of disdain in his bones. He thought that the Golden Scale Academy, a grassroots organization, could not compare to his family's school. He did not study seriously in the first 2 years. Later on, when he woke up and wanted to study hard, he couldn't keep up with his studies. The graduation exam was too noisy. He was afraid that he wouldn't do well in the exam. Coincidentally, his stepmother was Han Yu's ex-wife. The father and son planned to get in through the back door. Han Run looked at the results of the investigation and remained silent for a long time. "Mother, you met the wrong person." Even a blind man would know that the Duke of Lanting valued this examination. If there was a scandal of cheating in the examination and leaking the examination questions, wouldn't it be a slap to her face? What happened to the opponents who had once made her unhappy? The weeds on his grave were 3 feet high. If they found out that Han Yu was the one who leaked the questions, it would mean that the Master of Lanting was a bad judge of character. It would be the same as slapping her. At that time, no one could predict how angry the Lanting Guild would be and how they would retaliate. None of the people involved would be spared, including Madame Tao. That was courting death. Han Yu took a sip of tea. Everyone has their own fate. Han Run felt a little sullen for no reason. He asked his father, "Father, have you ever thought about remarrying?" His mother had already remarried. He couldn't force his father to remarry, could he? Han Run was a little angry when he said that. After all, it was not good for him to have a stepmother and a stepsister. Han Yu said, "When she is a little older." He didn't remarry because he considered the situation of his 2 sons, especially his youngest son, Han Chi, who was still too young. If he had remarried not long after his divorce, he couldn't guarantee the character of his new wife. As a man, he couldn't meddle in the affairs of the house. He was worried that his youngest son would be wronged. According to Han Yu's plan, he would at least wait until Han Chi was older and could go to the Golden Scale Academy before he could consider remarrying. He couldn't not remarry. Every family had their own relationships. The housekeeper was not omnipotent. Many social engagements required the personal presence of the master. Moreover, all the children in the house were unmarried. Their marriages still needed their legal mother to manage. Even for this reason, Han Yu would remarry at the right time. Now, remarrying would affect his work efficiency. Why would he need a woman if he was obsessed with work? Similar situations were happening in every family. Everyone was secretly trying to get the exam questions. They didn't know that their tricks were nothing in front of Jiang Pingji. As a person from the future, how could she not pay attention to cheating in exams? Even in this era, she still had a set of rather detailed security measures. These scumbags who were still in the early stages of cheating wanted to leak the questions. It was better to daydream before it got dark. They were not the only ones who were concerned about the exam papers. The salted fish in the streaming room were also concerned. Fuguedo. Speaking of which, you are drawing lots so casually. I suddenly feel sorry for the students. Waha mineral water. Streamer. You are too casual. The candidates will cry if they know the truth. Jiang Pingji received the question bank from the scholars of the Golden Scale Academy. She was too lazy to look through them one by one. She just drew lots. Faced with the complaints of the salted fish, Jiang Pingji said seriously, "It's just a small exam for more than 200 people. It's not the federal comprehensive exam. How can it be considered casual?" The Federation Army commander personally came to draw the questions. In a sense, the standard is much higher than the comprehensive examination. The federal comprehensive exam, that Jiang Pingji mentioned, was similar to the college entrance examination that the audience knew. However, there were still differences between the two. The federal implemented 20 years of compulsory education, which was equivalent to elementary school, junior high school, and university in the salted fish dimension. 20 years of compulsory education was free. Students could graduate and enter society after receiving their graduation certificate. The so-called comprehensive exam was the federal exam after 20 years of compulsory education. Students who had good enough grades and didn't want to enter society at this age could participate in the comprehensive exam at their own expense. Those who passed the comprehensive exam could enter the most prestigious university in the Federation. It was difficult to enter such a university, and even more difficult to leave. The elimination rate was as high as 60%. Those who could survive were the best of the best. The comprehensive exam was so important that they might not be able to invite the head of the army to attend. A small graduation exam of the Golden Scale Academy could make her do it. How could it be considered casual? As she spoke, Jiang Pingji's sharp eyes saw a mass of black and white slowly crawling toward her. She conveniently threw the freshly made exam paper aside. "Yo, mama's darling, give me a kiss, where's your daddy?" Chapter 1776. The Lulu. I don't know if I should be envious that the host has a panda, or envious that the host can kiss the panda QAQ. Cosimo, who loves climbing trees. We're all adults. Of course we're both envious. While the salted fishes were chatting and gossiping, there were also newbies in the live stream room who raised questions. Exodus. I've long heard of such a live streaming room. Although it's my first time getting a seat, I did a lot of homework before coming. If I remember correctly, the host got this panda during the battle against Meng Zhan. Didn't she? How many years has it been? Why hasn't young Master Panda grown up yet? I'm a fan of young Master, and have always been looking forward to young Master sweeping the weaklings. Or did he change to another one? According to Baidu, pandas have an average lifespan of about 25 years. It had been 7 or 8 years since the panda in Jiang Pingji's hands first appeared, but it was still in the form of a cub. Fairy Queen's Crimson. Upstairs, young Master hasn't changed at all. It's just that he hasn't grown up. Even though every panda looked exactly the same in the eyes of outsiders, veteran panda fans were able to distinguish the names of every panda, like they were their family treasures. This young panda cub was the #1 online celebrity among pandas, so of course she was no exception. They were very sure that the panda had never changed. It had always been the same one, but they didn't know why it didn't grow bigger. Of course, there were advantages to not growing up. Pandas were the cutest when they were a few months old. Jiang Pingji answered Salted Fish's question with a smile. It can't grow big. Maybe it has become a spirit. This explanation immediately provoked the Salted Fishes to denounce and ridicule him. Fugue Do. After the founding of the People's Republic, animals are not allowed to become spirits. Arctic Ocean Soda. Underscored the laws of the heavenly Tao here can restrain a panda from another plane? Of course not. So this panda must have become a spirit. Wawan Min ran. Speaking of which, if this little guy transforms into a human form, wouldn't she be the first female panda emperor? I think this is a good joke. Can anyone draw a picture of the officials bowing down to His Majesty the Panda? Iya Qingxiu. The person above must be a newbie who fell into the trap in recent years, right? When His Highness Panda first appeared, the host recognized him as her daughter, and jokingly called him young master. Many big hands had already drawn pictures of him. I'll introduce you to a few tentacles. You'll see them when you flip through them. Although the panda did not appear often, it had a lot of fans thanks to the halo of a national treasure. It was a pity that the appearance fee of the young master panda was too high. Jiang Pingji also ran around all year round, so it rarely appeared. Every time it appeared, it was very precious. For the salted fish dimension, pandas were probably the cutest animals that people all over the world liked. Jiang Pingji looked at the comments on the screen, and her lips curled into a faint smile. She hugged the little fellow's armpits, so that it was level with her line of sight. I've already said that you've become a spirit. Nan, why don't you transform into a human for Mama to see? The panda did not understand, and thought that Jiang Pingji was playing with it. She was still whining softly, and rubbing her cheeks with her soft and pink paws. She was so adorable that it could make people bleed. Once again, Jiang Pingji felt that having the panda as the clan emblem was the right decision. With such a little guy, she could play with him for an entire afternoon without getting bored. Seeing the ears on its head tremble, Jiang Pingji could not help but feel the itch to pinch them. The little guy sensed something, and suddenly raised its paws to hold its head. It tilted its head and looked at Jiang Pingji. It was so surprised that its small mouth opened slightly. At that moment, a bullet screen appeared in the streaming room. Kaihong Tang. So what if he's adorable? He can't take color photos for the rest of his life. This is where he can never compare to the baby. Jiang Pingji laughed softly in her heart. She hugged the little guy, and made it face the screen of the streaming room. She said to the screen, "Baby, open your mouth." The salted fishes were confused. The little guy, who was suddenly carried by Jiang Pingji, was also so confused that its mouth was half open. Who told you that my big baby can only take black and white photos? Look at the little guy's pink tongue, it's so adorable. Salted fishes. After playing with his daughter for a while, her father also followed the sound and came over. Jiang Pingji said, "What kind of father are you? You let your little girl run around? Aren't you afraid that she'll be caught and slaughtered?" Seeing that his lord was carrying a familiar iron-eating beast in her arms, Wei Xi's slightly nervous expression relaxed. He regained his composure, and a confident smile appeared at the corner of his lips. "I'm not afraid even if she gets lost. Who would dare to covet the eldest lady?" Iron-eating beasts were ferocious beasts. People feared them more than they loved them. Their impression of them was still limited to their powerful combat power and rapid explosive speed. Other than Wei Xi, not to mention the entire Shenyang district, even in the entire Wanzhou, there was no other family that raised iron-eating beasts. Wei Xi's iron-eating daughter had long become a well-known anecdote. The fact that the little guy had not grown up for so many years had also become a strange story. If someone saw such an iron-eating cub in Wanzhou, there was no doubt that it must be the eldest lady of Wei Xi's family. Wei Xi was the best at stirring up trouble. Did the person who touched Wei Xi's precious baby want to die in a rhythmic manner? Wei Xi saw the examination paper on the ground from the corner of his eye. He reached out to pick it up without any hesitation and tidied it up. "This is," Jiang Pingji said, "the examination paper for the Golden Scale Academy's graduation examination." Wei Xi sighed. "How can my lord just leave it aside? I don't know how many people are watching it now." "Why are they watching it?" A few people wanted to do better in the examination, but the majority still wanted to expose a cheating scandal and ruin Jiang Pingji's plans. It was not worth mentioning who these bastards were. Jiang Pingji could not find trouble with them for no reason without catching their tails. Jiang Pingji said, "So be it. Their eyes are on their faces. Wherever they want to stare, can I stop them?" Wei Xi said solemnly, "The public's opposition to the graduation examination and the subsequent selection of scholars in the imperial examinations is much greater than expected. The gentry were like a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Even if Jiang Pingji was very powerful now, the gentry still dared to whisper in private. If the team of novelists led by Wei Xi was Jiang Pingji's mouthpiece to manipulate public opinion, then the circle of celebrities was the mouthpiece of the gentry. The latter's influence was indeed not as great as before, but its prestige still remained. Back then, Jiang Pingji used the Golden Scale Academy's examination method to select scholars. Those who had the opportunity to advance were from humble families and gentry families. This was considered a skirmish. The opposition from the gentry was not loud, and Jiang Pingji's attitude was too unyielding. It was easily suppressed by her. Now the graduation examination for this batch of Golden Scale Academy students was different. Among the more than 200 students, other than a few who were born in gentry or commoner families, most of them were descendants of commoners who had died in the war. Well, these students were commoners who were of a higher class than commoners. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.